that's where they heard it from, which is why nobody reads the fucking Atlanta Black Star. Um, Maybe I should put their name in it to give them some spotlight or something, honey. But let me see, what is this? Yeah, here we go. So yeah, so they put a hit piece saying, well, where is it? I'm gonna put it in the thing. Pandering to white folks. Judge Joe Brown faces backlash after calling Carmelo Anthony a punk. So yeah.
Well, it's par for the course. That's all we've been hearing. He's a coon. He's a Sambo, right? He's shucking and jiving. All the typical racist tropes that they traffic in when they talk about Judge. So not
Exactly.
surprising.
Let me see if I did I put it in this one? Where did I put it at? Um, See, this is why I can't stand this shit here. Give me a
The best
second.
part is the people that are saying all these things do absolutely nothing for the community. Like zero. They've accomplished really nothing. They're pretty much nobodies. And it's just funny to hear all this jibber jabber,
Yeah,
hot
it's
air.
just pure bullshit, basically. All right, yeah. So I put it in the jumbotron, and I also put it in the blue pill. Oh, here go the judge. Oh, you put him up? Oh, okay. Let me send him a co-host and invite to co-host.
Yeah, before we get into it, too, I wanted to ask some questions about the Diddy case today
Yeah, of course.
to the judge. Hey, Judge, how are you?
Hey, how you doing? Hope everything's all right with you.
Hey, man, doing great. I don't know if you saw that the jury returned a verdict on 4 of the 5 counts today.
They
Uh,
indicated they had one.
yeah,
Isn't that what happened? I didn't recall that they gave a pronouncement as to what the verdict was.
yeah, that's correct. They said that they reached on 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then they're still deciding. And well, they said they were deadlocked pretty much on 1, and then I think the judge Supermanian was going to give an Allen charge.
They call
Um,
that the dynamite charge. Basically,
what?
it says all of the work that's gone into this, please go back there and do your damnedest to come up with a verdict
Right.
at
So
all costs. Go ahead.
they're going to come back tomorrow, and I think they're going to come to a decision tomorrow. If not, that they're going to be hung on that charge potentially, because I don't think they want to go, into the holiday weekend having to come back on Monday. They want to just be done with it. But a lot of people were saying, "Oh, it's definitely guilty," and that's not true because they could be split, right? It could be they convicted on Mann Act, and then they found him not guilty for sex trafficking, and
Well,
then
let
they're
me
trying to.
ask you this one. Let me pose this to you. There's that possibility. Anything's possible when you've got a jury. And one of the things, too, that they should have pushed harder for is to get the jury to come back in the courtroom. If you get the jury back in the courtroom, invariably, almost 100% of the time, they show by their body language what they're up to. They either won't make eye contact with the defense or defendants, or they look away, look at the ground, fidget a lot. Or what's going on is they act very self-righteous. But if they smile at the defense counsel at the table, they act amicable, you know that it's generally going your way. Now, the reason that's important is to preserve the record, is to, as soon as they get out and go back, make a motion for a mistrial so it's at the proper place in the record, so you will have it as a parachute if you have to appeal the verdict.
So the strategy behind that, because Agnifilo didn't want them back in, he basically wanted them to continue deliberating without any type of instruction, and that's kind of counter to what you said. Why would he
I know
want that?
that, but see, that's based on experience. I've had several thousand trials, and after a while, you kind of get a gestalt on what juries are likely to do and what they are about. Also, particularly when you get put in the position or you run the trials rather than you're trying the case. Now, here's the other thing, too. I am surprised that since this apparently was a well-funded defense, that the defense, though it has no obligation to put on proof, did not take the option of funding several clinical psychologists to discuss the phenomenon of sadomasochism. There was a pretty good argument by defense on closing about it, but there was no proof in the record to back that up, and they're relying upon this is like, say, public drunkenness or intoxication. It's supposed to be a common human experience, but it's not. So an elaboration of that would not have exposed the defense to Fifth Amendment liabilities, but would have put in the record a factual basis to rely upon for such things as the verdict is inconsistent with the proof, because the prosecution did not touch that either.
Yeah, I thought Mark did a strong job in the closing to sow some significant amount of reasonable doubt for each of the predicate acts as well as all the other counts.
Yeah.
And then also get into the jury's mind, why did the government bring this case, which they had a motion or prior to trial that the judge denied, saying that you're not allowed to introduce anything like that. And he was able to get it in the jury's mind anyway.
Yeah, that was a good move.
Yeah. Why is jury nullification not allowed? If the American public is the ultimate finder of fact, whether to or not the law is unjust or not, and we know from, Dr. King, an unjust law is no.
You're not allowed to do that as a juror. The instruction in most states and in the federal system goes something like this. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you will be the judges of the facts and the law. The court is the proper source from which you are to get the law, but you are to apply the law and decipher the facts in terms of your own observations in life, based on guidance by truth and justice as such dictate. But the court is the proper source from which you get the law. The jury is required to follow the law, but you can't go behind a not guilty verdict. So if they nullify what's going on, there's nothing you can do about it. I'll give you a classic example. 45 years ago, they had a weird law in the state of Tennessee that had been there for 100 years. And I had a number of clients who got charged with it. It was called engaging in unnatural sex acts that carried a sentence which was to be imposed by the jury, not the judge, but the jury in those days, with no sentencing guidelines, of between 3 and 15 years in the penitentiary. Now, when I voir dired the jury and I broke it down to them, I'd get something like, Jesus Christ, Lawyer Brown, is this true that what my wife and I do all the time, I could get 3 to 50, we could get 3 to 15 years in the state penitentiary? Is that true? Yes, sir, it is, Your Honor. Sir, it is indeed true that if a heterosexual consenting couple engaged in oral sex, that subjects them to a potential penalty of 3 to 15 years in the Tennessee State Penitentiary. Oh, hell no, that's the attitude. So obviously, even though the law required a finding of guilt, since essentially my clients were caught red-handed, not all of them in one case, the jury wasn't going to find them guilty of that. So that's jury nullification. That's classic.
Right. And my thing is, like, why wouldn't, like, at the end of the day, if the legislature's intent in crafting the RICO laws to go after organized crime and not to go into people's bedrooms like it is here, why couldn't the general public opine on that by returning a verdict of not guilty, even if technically
they can?
Yeah.
See, here's the
Yeah,
beautiful thing.
but why shouldn't that be that idea
You can't
introduced to the
tell
jury
it
by
to
the
the
defense?
jury because that's contrary
Why?
to the law. It's not the law. But as a practical matter, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it, even if they tell you after the verdict, because the prosecution cannot appeal a not guilty verdict. And the defense
Right, so that's
certainly won't. So
get.
how does
I'm
the
sorry.
issue get up through the system to an appellate level? It can't.
That's what I'm saying. So, like, if I was a juror, right, what I would do is I would just keep quiet the whole time and I'll stick to my guns and then go on a book circuit and a TV circuit, getting paid to the highest bidder, saying how I knew about jury nullification the whole time. And I decided that, no, I don't think this is right. And this is how you bring power back into the hands of the people.
Well,
And
they
then I would
do.
have
They do.
yeah. Well,
See, one of the
but
things
not
the
enough people
judge
know
can do
about
is
this.
this: the judge, if he is approached by either the defense and the prosecution, especially if there's no objection by either side and both join in, he can allow the jurors to discuss their verdict with the lawyers if they choose to do so. I always allowed that. So it was interesting what you would hear from them. And
Hmm.
sometimes they tell you that. I've had homicide cases, first degree murder cases, and in at least two instances when I was the judge, I had juries come back and say, Your Honor, if we feel that the victim deserved killing, do we have to convict the defendant? Literally, exactly those words. And the cases were separated by about 4 years. But two
And your
different.
answer obviously has to be yes, because that's what the law.
No, it doesn't. What your
Oh,
answer
really?
is, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the court has instructed you on the law, which is continued, not continued, but contained in a written instrument that is in the trial jackets. You are referred to those instructions in order to return to your deliberations and return such verdict as truth and justice dictate. Thank you very much. Mr. Williams, please escort the jury back to the jury room. And the judge has referred them to the instructions with somewhat similar words during the course of this case. These things happen, and there is the overweening consideration that you're dealing with humans. Humans are not AI computers, and they take all kinds of gestalts into consideration. And depending upon who's on the jury, how the case is presented to them, how adept and experienced the lawyers are on either side, has a great deal to do with it. The motivation of the lawyers, whether defense or prosecution, has a great deal to do with it. Some prosecutors just want a conviction. Others are very interested in promoting justice and know that in the right instance, they may have to stand forth and say, Your Honor, in the interest of justice, the state or the government or the prosecution recommends that these charges be dismissed because the proof is showing something other than the guilt of the defendant, and that is what you're there for primarily. It is not to get an acquittal or a conviction. Your job is a lawyer, and you can switch from one side to the other, and most lawyers do that in their careers, or a lot of them, not most. Your job is to ensure that the American system requiring due process of law is in fact in place and operative during the course of the trial, because you have an obligation not only to the immediate case and your client or the state that represent the state or the federal government, but to the public generally, to ensure that the laws are followed. So it would be inappropriate for a lawyer to be arguing in front of the jury that they should engage in jury nullification if he says it directly. But a smart lawyer can go in the back door if he can't go in the front and imply that. For example, most states and the feds allow the judge, well, not allow, but the judge is required to give a charge to the jury which says, ladies and gentlemen, you are to evaluate what you have heard through the filter of your own observations in life and experiences in life. So when a smart lawyer is arguing to the jury, he may say that when you get down to trying to assess credibility and what actually happened and what did not, you are supposed to reject or accept or neutralize or promote in your own in what your own observations and experiences in life suggest. So there are various things you can do with that. And see, one of the main things is to me, 2 hours worth of instructions to a jury is fairly short. I have read instructions to jurors lasting 8, 9 hours in a complex first degree murder case. And you have to go to the pattern jury instructions and take portions of those patterns and reduce them to a text and put them in writing and read all of that to the jury. And they are allowed to refer back to it during the course of the trial. You don't go recharge the jury unless there are very, very exceptional circumstances which don't happen. And see, part of the thing is the state is the charging entity. And if they charge somebody with something as witnessed or evidenced by their opening statement, in most jurisdictions, it's ground to dismiss the charge if they don't prove everything that they have alleged in their opening statement. So, what you do when you get all of this context in play, you say you are to follow the law because there are good and sound reasons, supposedly, why the law reads like it does. But that big mastodon, that mammoth in the room, that elephant, is saying, hey, you're also here to promote truth and justice. So do what you have to do, but always lean it in favor of the defendant. Now, I wrote the charge that we used for almost 30 years in Tennessee to define what reasonable doubt was. And part of my instruction that I drafted that got adopted by the state was, ladies and gentlemen, even if you believe that the defendant is guilty, you still must acquit him or her if you find that upon reflection, using the best of your logic, rationality, reason, and analytical capacity, you find that there is a reasonable possibility that something else other than guilt is indicated by the evidence. Even if you believe in the defendant's guilt, if you intellectually have this conclusion before you, you must acquit. Now, that's what they try to do. And they used to have a thing they taught in law school that says it is better for 100 guilty people to go free than one innocent man be convicted. A lot of lawyers, prosecution, defense lawyers, and judges have never heard of that these days. But see, that's the spirit of the law.
All right, we have speakers. So it is open mic, so people could come up. You don't have to talk about Diddy. You could talk. I just put hashtag alligator Alcatraz, and then I put plus ninjas are mad, meaning niggas, because there are some black people mad at the judge. So if you have an issue with them, then come up and speak your grievances. Just make sure you do not say the F word. And just completely lose your mind. But and then what anything else that people want to talk about that has nothing to do with the topics that I put up there. So I want to go to RC, then Exorcist, Mr. Ike, and I
No.
see Deborah. So go ahead, RC.
Yeah, hi. You know, you hear me? Because I am on the road driving. You
We
hear
hear
me?
you.
We could hear you.
Okay, good. Well, yes, it's a wonderful hearing y'all. I always enjoy hearing y'all, giving your extremely insightful and unique perspective, Judge. So my thing is, I'm not really saying because my questions do complete with something with all the big beautiful bill and stuff the US thing, right? My question is now in terms of the US stuff, in order to do the congressional constitutional amendments, they have to have a certain percentage. So my question is, from what I have been hearing or reading, is that they can just change in order to do a budget because they need a certain like the 60 votes or whatever in the Senate, which they don't really have. So, but that is a rule that can be changed to just a simple majority. So why don't they just change that a simple majority and leave like all the constitutional amendments to the super majority like it is in my country and in most countries?
Well, here's your problem. See, society evolves. And what has a clear meaning in 1866 may not have that same meaning in 1972. For example, after the Civil War, they quickly came up with, well, before the Civil War was actually over, they propounded the 13th Amendment to free or end slavery. And then they came up with the 14th Amendment and the 15th Amendment to deal with ex slaves. Now, the 15th Amendment was clearly designed to deal with the situation and circumstances of ex slaves, but by the late 1870s, less than 10 years later, it was, because of the way it was drafted, turned to protect the new thing called the corporation, which was to bring into play a thing created by states so that you could get the effect of the limited liability entity that was set up by Crown Edict in the United Kingdom. So most of the application for the 15th Amendment in American history has not been for purposes of the obvious beneficiaries, to wit, former slaves and their descendants, but to fictional persons known as corporations. In fact, the most recent decisions involving the 15th Amendment, that's a few years ago, said you cannot impugn the political rights and activities of a fictional person known as a corporation any more than you can an ordinary real live person. So you see these things morph. So what's going on is, what was the clear intent, which is witnessed by the transcriptions of the statements and arguments and presentations in Congress before they reported the 14th Amendment out to the states relative to what they were talking about when they talked about birthright citizenship. There was a specific and definite purpose for the language that they had, and that was to overcome the effects of a Supreme Court decision known as Plessy versus Ferguson, which was one of the most awkward and bad decisions the U.S. Supreme Court has ever made. Well, the Union won the Civil War, so the rulings of the U.S. Supreme Court were still in effect, and the not Plessy versus Ferguson, Dred Scott case, excuse me, which is one of the worst. Plessy was bad too. That was years later. But Dred Scott had declared that slaves essentially could not be citizens. So the rights applying to citizens did not apply to them. Well, what happened with the 14th Amendment is a specific language that addressed that in the 14th Amendment was to undo the Dred Scott case. So it did that. But 100 years later, what wound up happening is people, in the language of the 1960s rather than the 1860s, they said, okay, this is what it says clearly today, even though the meaning is not the same. It's like the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the, et cetera, et cetera. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What is the militia? People think of it now as a National Guard. Then it just simply meant all able-bodied males in the public between 15 and 60. So the language is the same, but the meaning changes, so there needs to be clarification. So what's going on is it's not
What are we
necessary.
talking about?
We're talking about the 14th Amendment and birthright
The birthright
citizenship.
citizenship
Okay.
So what
aspect that
happens
was
is
decided the other day.
there's no need for a constitutional amendment. That just needs to be an up of what the correct interpretation is to be. That's what we have. That has to do with the very first case the U.S. Supreme Court decided. One of the lines in there that a lot of people reject and are ignorant of says this: all law in the United States is the common law. The common law is that body of, quote, judge made law based on tradition, precedent, and the evolving conditions of society, unquote. So you have the concept of evolution. You have the concept that when the legislative body fails to be precise or something new comes up, what you wind up with is the need for judges who are presumed to be wise, intelligent, and experienced people, learned in the law and the way and experienced in the ways of the world, to modify it. But nowadays, nobody trusts anybody, so our whole system of law has deteriorated accordingly. But there's no need to have a constitutional amendment. There is a need for the supreme judicial body of the United States, the Supreme Court, to clarify what that means to eliminate the current confusion. If that sounded long, it's because it's complicated. It's been debated. It's not something that can be resolved by a 15-second soundbite. Sorry for the extrapolation, but I hope that cleared that up about the thing with the courts and birthright citizenship.
Okay. Um.
No, actually, the question was I was asking is why don't no my yeah because for assign the birthright citizenship because another lawyer explained to me exactly what you did. One of the rare ones. But my thing is that in terms of the constitutional constitutional amendments take a super majority, but stuff like passing a budget. Why is it so hard for the U.S. to pass a simple budget?
You have 50 states with 360, 340, now 400 million people involved in the process. There are a lot of competing interests. Some of these bills are so complex that very few of the people that are voting on them have actually read the whole thing. So it's a lot of lobbying going on, and there is a lack of spirit of compromise these days, or bipartisanship. So it gets fought out, and it is what it is. It's unavoidable. We do not operate on a parliamentary system. We operate on a compromise that was based on the fact that back in the 1780s, there almost was a disillusionment of the 13 colonies that had gotten free from Great Britain. They were having a profound argument, a fight, if you would, over how they were going to govern. So this system of government became a compromise to get all 13 colonies to unify into what was then the equivalent of what you have in the Euro Union today. You had 13 sovereign nations, the synonym or the same word for nation being state, who had joined together in a compromise so they could act as a unified entity rather than 13 little small former colonies in a backwoods location of the world. Now that's what you have.
All right.
Thank you.
Exorcist.
You're welcome.
Exorcist.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. I'm
You're
here.
up. You're
Okay. I want to say how you doing, Dana? How you doing, Judge? Your Honor, how you
Hello.
doing? Yes,
thank
yes, sir. Upon the recent decision by the Supreme Court, does this mean that Kamala can no longer run for president again because she's like both her parents are illegal?
No, they're not illegal. They actually had student visas. They were in San Francisco, the Bay Area, mid 1960s. She was born 1964. My former mother in law was a nurse in the maternity ward when she was born there. And her parents were here legally. So, as far as American law goes, as it's defined right now, she is a legal citizen eligible to run for president. There are two types of citizenship that are defined by the U.S. Constitution in separate places. One of them says essentially if you are born of at least one American parent anywhere in the world, you are a citizen of the United States, but you are not able to be or eligible to be either the president nor the vice president unless you make certain additional requirements. You have to be born on American soil. That means you have to be born in a state, a territory, uh, protectorate, a zone, a military or naval base, a consulate or an embassy. Those things are considered American soil. For example, if you were born of an American parent or parents and you were born in the Panama Canal Zone, you were a citizen. If you're born in Puerto Rico, or the American Virgin Islands, you're a citizen. If you're born in American Samoa, you're an American citizen. You can also run for president. If, like Cruz, the prominent Republican senator, you're born to American parents, but you're born in Canada, technically you're not eligible to be an American citizen. If you research some of the stuff that was in the Federalist Papers, what they anticipated was they did not want a foreign entity to have a sleeper who qualified as an American citizen becoming the commander in chief of the American military and naval forces. There are people that are famous people in world history that had that kind of problem. One of them is the famous English Prime Minister Winston Churchill, whose father was an English earl and whose mother was an heiress to the department store fortune in Chicago. So he had American citizenship and English citizenship. He renounced that of America so he could become Sir Winston and Prime Minister of Great Britain, etc., etc. So these things do occur, and they are important things. So the question with Obama was not really whether he was an American citizen, because it's clear that his mama was an American citizen born in Kansas. The question was whether he was born on American soil. Was he born in Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya, or as listed on one circulated birth certificate from when he ran for Congress in Chicago, Illinois, years ago? Or is it, in fact, the birth certificate that purports to come out of Hawaii showing that he was born there?
Yeah, yeah, yes, sir. I have one more question, if Dana and you don't
Go
mind.
right in, sir.
Yes, sir. I know you spoke on this before, but I want to like record it. Where previously you said that family courts were unconstitutional because it's no division between the executive legislation and
That's not
uh.
quite what I said.
Oh,
Domestic
can
courts
you?
can be constitutional. I was saying there was one in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee, that was not. The judge is a person, his name was Kenneth Turner. He was a vice cop and ran the vice squad. He was the captain. He dropped out of the sixth grade, and that's as far as he went. He said because he was ineligible to be a lawyer, that the rules of ethics did not apply to him. So he had a contract with Shelby County in Memphis to prosecute child support violations. He had a contract with them to represent people who were charged with that. And by state law, since he was the elected judge, he had the responsibility of adjudicating those people he was in charge of arresting and what happened with those people he was in charge of defending. And since he could not hear a case because of his educational deficiencies by order of the Supreme Court, he got to appoint a whole crew of referees and magistrates to sit on a bench as special judges and do what he got elected to do but could not do. I said that was unconstitutional, not domestic courts per se.
Well, I was talking about like the child support
Yeah, well,
courts.
that's what
Like,
I'm
is there
talking about.
no?
In Shelby County, Memphis and Shelby County juvenile courts
Oh, okay.
got the
My
jurisdiction
apologies.
from the fact that one of their employees was a state senator over the state judicial commission. They got a law passed that gave them original jurisdiction over all child support matters, even those that came out of a divorce proceeding, unless the divorce judge in circuit court specifically retained that to the circuit court or chancery courts. So here you had a minor court where you had a sixth grade dropout that couldn't even hear the case, that had gotten a law passed where referees who were just lawyers most of the time but had a part-time job to sit and hear cases he couldn't, they were deciding child support matters is a matter of primary jurisdiction, which got to be very poisonous.
Yeah, my bad. I'm sorry. I, my
Well,
apologies.
I
I
understand how
guess I
you got that. It's
misunderstood.
complicated, so I hope that cleared it up. I was not saying domestic courts are unconstitutional. It's just in some places they are abused for what they are.
Yes, sir. My apologies.
Okay.
All right. Who
That's
we
it.
got next?
Uh, Mister still up here?
Nope. We got
Oh,
Ike,
I
Exorcist,
yeah.
RC, Doe, and Deborah.
All right, so we have so Ike is next, then Deborah. And anybody want to request to come up, please do so. It's open mic. Also touching on, I changed it up. 14th Amendment, of course, Diddy. Of course, the alligator Alcatraz. Gotta talk about that. And all you niggas that's mad at the judge, come up. Y'all want to hold spaces about him, about me, about Isaiah. You want to say all this nasty, untruthful things in your spaces? Come up. We'll wait for you.
They're not
Or you
interested
just
for
gonna send it
and I,
anonymous.
yeah, they're not interested in an honest dialogue. They just want to pop off and then
Right.
run away.
They just want to talk shit and get some people in their spaces, and that's it.
Well,
All right, go
may
ahead,
I say
Ike.
something very quickly on that?
Mhm.
From 55 years ago, when I was involved in what was going on in the mid 1960s in the university and college setting in the streets of big cities all across America, I can claim credit for helping to draft one of the first affirmative action programs in the country, which wasn't like people think it was. It was more closely to what Justice Robert wrote in his opinion. I remember one of our biggest problems was loudmouths who wanted to portray that they were in with everybody who was actually doing something, but you couldn't get them to do anything because they were scared stiff to actually stand up against the entities that they thought were oppressing them. So I have run into a lot of loudmouths who like to spout slogans, talk militantly, and you can't get them to do anything, and they're not prepared either by education, attitude, circumstance, inclination, or training. They keep talking about this somehow or another nebulous revolution, but they've never been on a pistol range or a firing range and learned how to shoot a gun. They talk all kinds of stuff about he should have stabbed this white guy in the chest because when all it was a fist fight situation, and they've never taken martial arts, learned how to box, or done anything relative to the manly arts of self-defense. So it becomes ludicrous when you listen to how they spout off and they tell you what they're thinking in terms of the people that are actually their enemies and what those enemies have been putting in their heads with 50 years of propaganda that glorifies dysfunction. They use the same terms, same phrases, and display the same value system. So they're fond of calling people coons when they actually act like the ideal coons. So I find that kind of ludicrous. But anyway,
Go ahead, Ike.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Thank you, Donna, for allowing me to speak. And my
It's Dana
question,
with the long A. I'm not
oh,
Hispanic.
Dana. I'm sorry, Dana. Well, thank you for allowing me to speak. And my question is directed at Joe Brown. And it's being asked, opposed to a post of his speaking against wokeness in black men. And I wanted you to expound on it.
I don't
I'm
have
a young
anything against
Negro.
black men. You're entitled to your opinion. I just don't like black boys who down manhood because they've been speaking and speak in terms of the phraseology, the thinking process, the thought process, and the ideology of feminists that have been
Yeah,
trying to emasculate the country for the last 55 years. So they think they're
okay.
being men, but they're not. I'll give you an example where it seems I've got a lot of people going on. I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. I was out of high school before the mid 60s and graduated from UCLA in 1969. All right. I know
Yeah.
from back when the person that would stab somebody, shoot somebody, and I've actually been present when it happened a few times, was usually the scaredest coward out there, not the brave
Okay.
person. And even though somebody is, of course, presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt or pleads guilty appropriately, what happens is, irrespective of that, there is something unmanly about stabbing somebody in the chest with a deadly weapon when the worst you can get is a behind beating. You take that beating, learn from it, learn to fight better or more cunningly, and you prevail the next go around. Match number,
Of course.
rematch. So people are hollering about a certain young guy who just hit 18, stabbed the a rival athlete in the chest because he was a twin and he weighed 192 pounds. But you take that in the context of, look, this guy's supposed to be captain of the football team, which means he starts. And that means every time there's a play when he's in the game as either defense or offense, there are at least 11 guys the size of one of those twins or close to it that he's got to go beat on or get beat on by, tackling, blocking, or being tackled by. And I don't buy this that you're afraid of getting physically beat, because that's why you have a
Okay.
helmet, shoulder pads, chest pad, rib pads, the thigh pads, hip pads, knee pads, and all kinds of other stuff. And you're taped up. I used to play football, Dorsey High and UCLA for a while. So
Okay.
it's a rough game. So you're telling me that you're so afraid of somebody punching you because you have two guys instead of a whole offensive line trying to block you and you're supposed to be making a tackle, or the whole defensive line, the defensive ends, the tackles, the linebackers coming at you because you're going to pass or run for the ball and you're scared, you got to stay. I don't buy that. So anyway, it's not a man move. Men have
All
this.
right, let him respond.
Okay, hold on. I'm just making a station. Men have this thing of fight fair, fight like a man. You didn't win. You sucker punched him. He'd beat you if it was a fair fight. Rules of war, Geneva
Okay.
Convention, white flag, and everybody stops shooting and they have a parlay. That's how men do it. Now, with
Okay.
that said, go right ahead.
Uh, well, I completely agree with your stance. I It would seem that it was a misunderstanding because I favor balance and calculation, and everything you've pretty much explained, I agree with. And I initially it seemed that you viewed corrective or balanced correctiveness uh, of the rhetoric against the modern political and social militants of our Negro population as weak, favoring extremist ideologies like the Black Hebrew Israelite doctrines and FBA mindsets displayed across social media. I initially thought you leaned towards that instead of a more balanced approach, and it seems like that wasn't the case. So
May I offer a little remark on that if it sheds light on this subject? When
yeah, go ahead.
somebody or a population or a group of people feels oppressed and powerless, they come up with all sorts of things to explain their circumstances. And generally, what they do is they claim credit for being something else that they perceive to have merit. And they scapegoat
Exactly.
other people. A classic example are the Nazis. The Nazis were Germans, and Germany had been a country less than 50 years at the time when they got whipped in World War One.
Mm,
They came up with this thing about the Aryan Superman. Aryans are real. They're called Indo-Aryans, but they're not blonde-haired, blue-eyed. They look just exactly like, well, for that matter, Kamala Harris, and they tend to be Hindu and they come from India. But they
mm,
subsumed them and said they were Aryans. The Nazis started blaming the Jewish community for what happened to them. They just got whipped, but they wanted a scapegoat. So what you see as a counterpart is weak-minded Negroes who did not prepare themselves to deal with what they actually want in terms of being able to help accomplish it. They want to blame white
Mm,
supremacy. White supremacy is real, but so is the fact that if you're out in the woods and you're hiking through Yosemite, you may get done in by a grizzly bear because you're not cautious enough. But the world is
mm,
filled with adversity. That's just something you need in order to accomplish something. So it does you no good to be ill prepared to personally do anything about what you're complaining of and try to blame somebody else and then take this feminist position of somehow or another because you are who you are, somebody owes you something. The world is a dangerous
mm,
place. It owes nobody anything, though people who are wise people may attempt to enforce fairness, fundamental propriety, law, order, rules, and all this other stuff so that we do not have a mess. Now, that being the case, I don't like people that like to go say, I'm this, and they say to me, you hate what you are. How can you be anything if you hate yourself? If you didn't hate yourself, why
exactly.
would you so thoroughly reject it? Why are you so jealous of somebody else that you want to claim to be them and you turn right around and claim they're your enemy? Doesn't make any sense.
Mm,
See, that's what I say. Be consistent. And in order to be consistent and accomplish something, you have to be able to move towards your objective without distracting yourself with all sorts of little things on the side where you do not do rule one requirement. You know what that is? Personal accountability and responsibility.
mm.
So,
All right. Well, you explained it perfectly well for me and broke it down exactly.
thank you, sir.
I don't. Of course. Thank you for your time. That's all I had to ask.
Thank you for your appearance. Appreciate it.
Of
Thank
course.
you. Right.
You guys have a good day.
Um,
Of course. Thank you.
Deborah, then Rusty, and it is open mic. So, guys, if you want to request to come up, please do so. If not, I guess we can have an early night. Go ahead, Deborah.
Hi, good evening, everybody. How you
Hey, how
doing?
are you?
I'm
Hey, Deborah.
okay.
Good
I'm
to see
I'm
you.
getting through my humps. I'm learning a lot about the law too. So everything's good. But you guys, I knew that I kind of figured Trump was going to go the route that he went, and because I do think Trump is a very intelligent man, and I but the thing is like right now, the people that are sitting in different places all over the world, like I really don't think they understand the Constitution or how it works or how they're supposed to interpret it. But when I read it, and then I've read some books to support Dred Scott decision and stuff like that, I want to ask the judge, like, why do you think that instead of growing to describe, and I don't know what the word would be, to analyze the Constitution the way it is, you know and convert it to how we use it today? Why do you think that's the way things are going? And is it because people aren't really practicing law and doing the homework and before they're appointed to be judges, or even congressmen and senators? They just don't seem like they're doing the homework, because I always heard that if you were a congressman, you had to spend your first year just learning your way around, reading legislation, trying to understand how to formulate any legislation that you may write, and just supporting your seniors. Like, how do you think that got lost? Because it seems like it got lost in the sauce.
Well, it got lost because about 50 some years ago they stopped teaching it. See, most of what I tell you about this, I learned in the fifth and sixth grade, not even law school. The
Mm-hmm.
Constitution itself, in a small pamphlet, is about, oh, I'd say about 15 pages long, maybe 16. It
Mm-hmm. I
is
have
much,
one.
it's much, much shorter than the booklet you need to practically memorize if you're going to get your driver's license when you memorize the rules of the road. They are guidelines And it was known by some wise people who wrote this thing that things change. I recited this earlier. The very first case heard by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1792 said the law in the United States is based on tradition, precedent, and the evolving conditions of society. So societies evolve. Words change, meanings change, circumstances change, popular understanding of what's going on changes. The judge shows, of which I took advantage, became the most popular, what they call, I guess it would be informative entertainment or reality type shows, and supplanted, suppressed soap operas. That's because until fairly recently, the most popular entertainment in America wasn't going to the opera, wasn't going to the concert, wasn't going to ballet, wasn't going to the play. It was going to courts and watching the drama, intrigue, and majesty of the system at work, and listening to the oratory of lawyers who were well versed in doing that sort of thing as cases were tried. And in the process, you learned about your law, your system, and how it worked. We no longer have that, but we do have the craving to know, which is why these judge schools were so popular. We have, unfortunately, the Hollywood pressure that has reduced that. So instead of having people who are relatively experienced in being judges, you have brand newbies who just have the cute look, and people who've never been judges who sit up there and play like they're one. And that's not the real deal. But America is a system where the people participate in it. The people are supposed to be advised and kept informed of what their rules are, what's good about them, what's bad about them, and encouraged to have input in them. That's why we have the First Amendment. But that's been subverted as of late, and it's been turned into something that's kind of poisonous and defeats that purpose. And when you listen to the mainstream media, they have stuff that 55 years ago your typical 12, 14-year-old would have known, and there's nobody on the multi-million-dollar staff of this huge network news outlet that had even heard of the stuff. And they can't tell you because they're more interested in whether they use Mac C45 or something, and how well their hair is groomed when they're looking into the camera lens like they're talking directly to you and reading some printout that the audience can't see that a 23-year-old prepared. Now, that's a great deal of difference. It's entertainment, not information. It's not a public service, it's a money generating proposition. And it is devolved into not keeping the public informed, wise, and on top of their system and what's going on. It has become one of those entertainments that Caesar talked about when he said, Donde e pane circenses, give them bread and circuses, feed them and entertain them, and they won't care what you do. And it has become a primary source of entertainment. Talking heads, excitement. You can hardly wait to find out what's next, and everything has to be reduced to a 5 to 15-second sound bite with appropriate this, that, and the other instead of accuracy, substance, and weight. So we bring this on ourselves because we patronize it. We go to the box office, so to speak, spend our money, paying our dimes, and buy the products. So I'll pass
Yeah, well,
on it.
lately, I've been really digging Ironside. I mean, I think it's is it Ironside? No, Perry Mason. Perry Mason. I've been really digging
The old one or the new
Per-
one?
the old one. The old ones are good, but I mean, the new ones are good. I was trying to watch all of them, but they're actually pretty good because you get to see how justice prevails. And he will find, I mean, I know that's entertainment as well. But so then Ketanji Brown, I just thought that she was way out of line with what she was saying. So I'm just wondering what was her background to get her experience.
Well,
I mean, to get the
let's
position.
say this. I know somebody well. Her name is Rogery Clifton, Mrs. Rogery Clifton, Justice Clifton, on the same Second Circuit sort of a Second Circuit Court of Appeals that Ketanji Jackson was on, who would have made an excellent member of the U.S. Supreme Court. I know Justice Bernice Donald, who was on the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeal, who would have made an excellent female justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. Very intelligent, both of them, very experienced in law, covering both sides over long years with excellent opinions that they've read, knowledgeable, who dig for reality, philosophy, point, and principle. They got passed over by somebody that was obviously a shield for the, what shall we say, tranny crowd that is being pushed by the Rainbow Bunch so hard these days. That whole thing about she did not know what a woman was a sop to the people with that kind of worldview. That's their right in politics, but I don't think it's good for the republic.
Yeah, the what's her name? The one that Trump appointed. I think she spoke well, when she was saying what she said to her. And then I think Sotomayor, at least she seemed to have a basis for her statement. But Katanji Brown, I'm like, where did she get that from? She doesn't seem like she even really understands, the Constitution, because how, with what she said. So it's amazing to me that these people have made it, that she made it to the Supreme Court. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, I have personally representing me, I have women and men, middle aged and old. And I don't select them based on whether they're woman or male. I select them based on their ability, intelligence, acumen, uh, knowledge, and experience in the law, and wisdom in the ways of the world. But when you go around trying to pick somebody just so you can say, oh, I want this nice bouquet of flowers. So I want some roses. Some of them should be yellow, some should be red, and I want some chrysanthemums all in here. That's not how you pick a court nor a governing body, because you're trying to match an image. It's to achieve a goal. And the goal is basically achieved by selecting as your leadership wise, accomplished, and experienced persons to do the leading. You see, fundamentally, we think of somebody in most of these positions as sitting at a desk, a plush desk with a business suit, whether it is the female or male edition thereof. And that's not really what's going on. If you want to see what is at issue, next time you go to a zoo, go to the primate area and watch the chimps and the baboons and see what it looks like raw as to who, male and female, are the alphas running everything in that enclosure, that natural habitat enclosure. Or if you ever get on one of these safaris and get to look for real, you can see that too. Or if you're a hunter and you're up north, you might get a chance to see wolves lurking through the forest and see how they do it. It's the same thing. And that's what basically is at issue. And when you have people that can't fit into that role, they have no business in a leadership position because they lack what's necessary. You should
Right.
be able to be a leader because you walk into a room and everybody says, oh, wow, who is this that just walked in? Not because you have the title.
Hmm.
Rusty.
Oh, Dana, I want to say, I haven't heard anybody coming for you, but I was in a room and this girl, she just started cursing. And she was like, and I went in on her. I said, you just have a 5-word vocabulary. And she was like, oh, man, you're like that Dana. And I'm like, why do you, dislike Dana? I'm like, Dana's doing something very well for the public. And I'm like, you're just jealous. But I think that people are so in their little cocoons. And I think she never left the block. So I just, the more and more I hear, if anybody's coming for you, it's because you're doing something very good. And there are a lot of us that really like you and what you do, and you're really fair. And like I said before, my friend Agnes was a journalist. I know she's in heaven smiling down on you. And I have to show you a picture of her one day because you're doing a great job. So keep it up.
I appreciate that, Deborah. Thank
So
you so
that sounds
much.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah, I
you're
don't
welcome.
pay. I don't pay anybody, especially on X, no mind, because you don't even see these people. You know what I'm saying? I don't even know what they look like,
Mm-hmm.
but they talk so much stuff, but they never
Mm-hmm.
They never show their face. Even as a profile, they don't even show their face. But yeah, I really appreciate that.
Thank
Okay.
you for
All
saying
right.
that about
Thanks.
Miss Dana. I agree with you.
Yeah, she does, and
Mm,
I like it.
May
I
I
like it
give
a
you
lot.
one
Okay.
little example? He's now dead, but I called him my brother since we were best friends for almost 60 years. He was a penultimate martial artist. He also had PhDs. He'd been a college professor. He was a chief, co-executive producer on my show for a while. Did all kinds of things for intelligence agencies. And for 15 years, Black Belt magazine said he was, quote, probably the most dangerous human alive in North America. Now, this is this guy, all right? And we'd go places and idiots would look at this nice guy. He's a big guy, but he was always pleasant and polite to everybody. And they'd always try to pick on him like, fool, what are you doing?
Mhm. All right.
Do you know who that is?
Oh,
Yeah, I know what I'm doing. You don't even know. So why are you sitting there trying to perpetrate that you are all this and that? And you don't come up to this guy intellectually. You don't come up to him when it comes to moral fiber. You certainly don't come up to him when it comes to being a badass. So why are you even trying to perpetrate this? What is it about you that makes you feel so inferior that you have to get off by downing somebody else you don't even know?
all right. So I want to go to Rusty and the Wilson magazine. And guys, please request to come up. And we're doing really good time. I'm not going past midnight, and I really don't want to go over 2 hours, and which means I would like to wrap it up by 11:30. But go ahead, Rusty. How are you?
Good afternoon, Miss Dana, Judge Peter. I hope you guys are doing well this afternoon. So,
Great to see you.
well, it's good to
I
see
do.
you guys too. Um, so I have a question, and I hope I asked this question right. So it's kind of about the Diddy trial. I listen to a lot of spaces and follow a lot of people. I love spaces. And there's I don't know if you'd call them conspiracy theory. I don't know what you call it, but they think that Diddy is like kind of Epstein, and that basically he's some kind of either a government controlled or foreign government controlled blackmail ring, also, pedophile ring too. And I'm just kind of curious, like, I haven't been keeping up with the trials. Have you heard anything like that, or that would make you think that? And then my second question is, because to me, just from the little scraps that I've been hearing, I haven't really been following it very closely. It seems like it's just about him and his girlfriends and just some, freaky stuff like that. Is there a possibility that a separate trial with any of that stuff? I don't know. These people seem really sure. So I'm just kind of curious. Have you heard anything like that? Or I don't know. If I hope that makes sense.
You want me to respond to that?
Yeah, I'm just kind of
Okay.
curious if you've heard anything or what your thoughts are
I
on
put
that.
it this way: having been in Hollywood at the top for 15 years, I'd say what was going on was a typical Hollywood move to get something on everybody else, so they're not the only ones with something on somebody, meaning you. So it's a defense mechanism. I think what was going on, based on my 50 years of being involved in law and a lot of trial work, particularly criminal matters, what I was seeing was what they now call lawfare being applied to protect certain other unnamed but somewhat implicated individuals from being exposed to embarrassment prior to the November 2024 election cycle.
So you think it goes higher than Diddy also is what
Oh,
you're saying.
yeah. See, he wanted to post a $50 million bond with 5 securities. The offenses for the crimes that he's charged with, or for the counts of the indictment, are Mann Act things. The Mann Act was designed to get Jack Johnson, a black world heavyweight champion before World War I, out of the way because he had a white wife and he flaunted her all over the country. He was the first person that was arrested under the act. He got convicted and got 1 year. He got 5 years for escaping, but he got 1 year for the offense. So here you are, somebody with 50 some $1 million worth of bond ready to post for something that has four counts of indictments, four counts of an indictment that charged stuff that 45 years ago, 40 years ago, I had a whole bunch of clients charged with because they were running that pimp prostitute game between West Memphis, Arkansas, and Memphis, Tennessee, and down in Mississippi, where the subject of P Valley, the popular series, occurs. So you'd get a lot of that. So I'm looking at this like, hey, this is almost misdemeanor action. So you have all of this. Why? And why is a $50 million bond not sufficient to secure his presence when he comes back from an island that has no extradition agreement with the United States? He surrenders his passport before he even gets charged. He gets a place in New York so he can be near the place of prosecution. And you want to say we're going to have this because Homeland Security got him, not the FBI, so we can evoke this confidentiality aspect and essentially hold him incommunicado with no bond for something that most of my clients, for the same charges over and over, would post maybe $1,000 bond for. And they're completely transient. So, what in the world am I looking at? And I say, hey, something's wrong about this. I don't approve of what he did or is alleged to have done at all. I don't like that. But that's Hollywood. You have a bunch of adults that everybody else in the world looks up to guide their outlook on life, their ways of comportment and self conduct. But these are adults who spent their whole lives in make believe, fantasy, and distraction. They're not exactly people who are grounded in reality, even though some of them may have backgrounds, like since his name got brought up, Isaiah Washington. He was a U.S. Marine, seen action. He's a hell of a shooter, well accomplished in martial arts, a wise man. You have those exceptions, but as a general rule, just because you can sing does not mean that you're wise in the ways of the world, but we tend to act like they are. So they've got this whole big, tremendously well financed industry where they thrive on stabbing each other in the back and then giggling about it 3 weeks later while they're having wine sitting on a leather couch in the bar area of a five-star hotel. And they blackmail each other regularly so they can defend against attacks that are too low down and dirty. And that's what
But
I was.
Judge, Judge, let me ask you this. So that space that I listen to, like I said, they follow all this stuff, and I don't, but they're convinced, like there's a lot of people that are just convinced, and I'm a Trump supporter, but they're convinced like Trump is running something in the background, that all the people up above them are gonna come to justice. And like, if this is what Diddy's getting, charged with, basically it almost kind of sounds like, I don't know, domestic abuse with some prostitution thrown in there. I mean, I'm just like, they're not going to hold him for something else. And they don't seem to really be coming forth with any big names of bigger people. I mean, how would that work? I mean, do you understand? Does my question make any sense? Because these people are
Yeah,
like, oh, it's all going to come down. This is just
yeah.
the start of it.
Yeah, see, I've been a judge. I got elected to two 8-year terms as a criminal court judge. And there were occasions where counsel for defense and prosecution approached the bench to have the testimony, the evidence limited because somebody who was not indicted might have been exposed to public ridicule. And I may or may not have granted the request. So that does go on in law. Like President Obama in 2007, when he was campaigning for the presidency as the Democratic candidate, to be the Democratic candidate, he was named by name in 7 counts of a RICO indictment as a facilitator, but unindicted. So I did not hear anything at all, well, a few little smidgens of something, in that entire run up to the election. Look, you got somebody that is running for U.S. president, and he's listed by name in 7 counts of a long, long RICO indictment. Why nobody is mentioning this? But you see, it depends on who is in favor. When the party that is favoring that person is in a position to appoint the Attorney General of the United States subject to approval by a Senate run by the same party. See, there's an unavoidable partisan aspect of any appointment. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, since the United States works on partisan politics. And if you are not cognizant of partisan politics, then you can work a disaster when you start trying to deal with the rest of the governmental structure that has both Democrats, Republicans, and independents in it. Now, if
I
that,
So
see.
do you see this blowing up? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, Rusty, I believe what they're saying, and it makes sense, right? If you think about it, the Biden Justice Department brought this case against Diddy, and I truly believe he's another Epstein. If you look at his history and how he got put on, how he was able to start a record label at 23, he was under the tutelage of a guy named Clive Davis, who was connected to other Israeli handlers. All the money comes in and flows in through them. They use sexual blackmail in order to create new assets for the intelligence agencies. So he's been doing this for years, decades even, right? He has all this information. The Biden department knows he has the information. You could have Trump, when he's coming up, have gotten to him through different handlers saying, we want you to give us this information because we want to go after Biden and we want to go after everybody who's connected to making to basically making a mockery of the election system and faking the election in 2020. And so now you say, okay, here's how we're going to play it out. We're going to let them run their charade in Southern District with the last holdovers from the Biden administration, who's prosecuting him now, which is Comey's daughter, who's doing the prosecution. She's leading it. Let him go through it. If they convict him, I already got a deal set up with him where I'm going to pardon him, and he's already handed over all the information. He has access to it now. Trump should have access to it because HSI, when they went to the houses, was able to seize all that information. And they have all the different individuals that they were able to put the screws to and under the hot lights to be able to determine what they know. So now think about it like this. Trump and his DOJ and all the agencies have all that information now, and then they're going to be able to unleash all that on all the domestic and foreign enemies that we have here that have been trying to subvert the country and destroy us from the inside out. So I definitely think that's a possibility, and it makes sense to me.
I agree
So
with you.
Peter,
I agree with you. I agree with you.
so Peter, I have a so when I came
Wow.
I came to
Wow.
New York in '93, and that was the height. That's when Puffy was beginning to make his mark, or maybe he was here earlier. I don't know, but I was in the same circles, running around, running into people, and my neighbor actually was his party coordinator, and was saying, "Oh, I can get you tickets for Puffy's parties," and I'm like, "I'm not into rap," but like Puffy got into it, and I think he got so heavy into it, where he always videotaped, because I've learned, from somebody that there were tapes left in this guy passed away, and there were tapes left in his apartment. But do you think that he got in, and he got in deep, and then he figured that he couldn't do anything, so he just started videotaping? Or you think he was just a freak that was in, at the beginning, because I heard
No,
he went to a Catholic.
I think
You
that
think
he
that
was groomed to do this for his
okay.
handlers. I think that eventually they told him this is how it's going to go. You understand the music and entertainment industries were controlled by organized crime, uh,
Mm-hmm.
all the way up through the
Right.
90s, right? An individual by the name of Morris Levy, who was connected to the Genovese crime family and directly to Chin Gigante. Chin actually had control of an individual by the name of Tommy James, who put out a
Mm-hmm.
number of hit records. And Tommy actually
Mm-hmm.
wrote a book about his life with the mafia and how he got signed and how he was basically just absorbed by Morris. And basically took all of his masters. They made like $40 million off of him, the Genovese family. And then Tommy Mottola was also hanging out with those guys, and he took over Sony. And, you could look up the rest of his history and what he's done since then. But this was then the same type of arrangement was with Diddy and Claude Davis and all these other industry execs. And if you look and trace the money, there's a great individual who does a lot of deep dives on this. His name is I can't think of it right now. It'll come to me in a few minutes though. But he did a whole deep dive when Lil Rod dropped his lawsuit and all the connections that Diddy has to all these huge players that are connected to the Israelis and the intelligence agencies. You got to understand, you look at this through the lens of, you think this is an entertainment and their cultural icons. All this is controlled. All this is
Mm-hmm.
propaganda. This is another arm of the government using neurolinguistic programming to get you to do things. And we're constantly under attack. I know it sounds very conspiratorial. You really do have to guard yourself and have the moral fiber, like Judge was talking about earlier with the gentleman that he used to hang around. Some of the toughest guys in the world are also the kindest, gentlest guys, because they
Mhm.
realize and they've seen what real violence is, and they've actually exacted that against evil individuals. And so
So,
Well,
there's a
well, I
whole
have
lot
a
to answer
close
it.
friend. I have a close friend who came here from Boston, and they almost signed with Clive Davis, but I forget what happened, and they did it. And like in I study music too, and you see the dark side of it, and if you take the next step, you're locked in.
Well,
So
take a look at who
yeah.
owns part of Twitter. It's Diddy. Diddy owns part of
Mm-hmm.
Twitter. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of big money interests that are very interested in what's going on with him. I definitely believe Trump is going to pardon him because he sees it
Yes.
as another railroading, like he got railroaded in the same exact area
so,
in the same
so
district.
you're basically saying that Diddy and like what Judge was saying, like his bond and stuff didn't really make sense for kind of domestic and prostitution stuff like that. So you're thinking basically what they did is they got him to roll over on his handlers that are above him, and you think they'll eventually go down after this? I guess is that you
Yes,
think that's plausible, Judge?
think what would you, Rusty?
Yeah,
Imagine
that's
this.
very
Go ahead, you
possible.
go. Imagine this, right? You have a ton of power and money. Your family's been involved in money and had money for decades, if not hundreds of years, connected to the most powerful people in the world. Are you going to give up that money? No. You're going to investigate different ways that you can maintain that power base and that you can control the populace. And you use useful idiots and other individuals who think they're championing some cause when in reality they're just parroting the whole talking point and line that's going to allow the people in power to continue to maintain that power. So these people weren't made from a finger, they weren't born yesterday. These are very sophisticated
Well,
individuals and
yeah,
they're
I've
Yeah.
been
evil and dark.
Are you
I've
talking
been
about
hearing that.
1 second, Rusty, and I'm gonna let you finish up. Are you talking about the Drake thing? Because I heard somebody say on somebody's podcast it was just short. Like these record labels, they use gangster tactics. So UMG did what they did to Drake because he was getting a better deal from Sony. But Sony did the same thing, i.e. Tommy Mottola, to Mariah Carey, trying to discredit their brand and, you know, wipe away their brand or suppress their, not so much their views, but their record plays and sales like that. So all these labels, it's, honestly, when you talk about Rico, they actually, to me, fit that definition of Rico. But I just wanted to
Yes.
say that. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
Dana, you're absolutely right. And I'll land with this. The charging decisions rest with the prosecution, right? The prosecutors and the DOJs and the heads of these U.S. attorneys office, they get to have discretion, prosecutorial discretion, deciding who they're going to go after, when they're going to go after them, and what they're going to do. And they're by and large accountable to no one. There's no like Agnifilo said last week during when he did the closing. Why did they charge this case? No victim came forward to make a claim. They charged this case on their own after reading Cassie's lawsuit. And so what we
Right.
need is accountability for why these individuals are making the decisions they are making because they're literally running around doing whatever they want and are
Right.
accountable to no one except for whoever's in the head of the Justice Department who's setting that policy, quashing these things or letting them ride. So that's a good thing for
So
us to
Let
look
me
into
I
add
want
next.
something.
wait 1 second.
May
I
I
want
add
I want
something to
I
And
that,
I
want
think
Dennis, very
Rusty. I
quickly?
want I want Rusty to land her plane to finish what she was saying. Because we do have other speakers: the Wilson, Fletcher, G. Rich, and Derek. So go ahead, Rusty.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that that blows my mind to hear because Judge is extremely fair, even headed, And I've been hearing this from several people, and to hear him say that that's a very real possibility, or that that's possible, and that he feels like there's something that's not quite matching up on the, I mean, that's just wild. Like, somebody needs to clip that. You know what I'm saying?
Let me say
That
something about this.
that is wild.
Let me say something about this on having experienced it contemporaneously with it occurring. I had been practicing law for a while, and late 1970s, early 1980s, former President Joe Biden, then trying to get to be an established senator, Senator Byrd, Senator Eastland Strickland from Mississippi, and some others, they passed some statutes that allowed federal prosecutors to bend the rules to persecute someone literally. So if they could not get a criminal conviction, they could bankrupt the individual, stress them out, or basically neutralize them if their positions were not subject to appropriate approval. I have had the personal opportunity to read as much of the downloads of Hunter Biden's 3 laptops, not one, as the press falsely reports. There were 3. And based on what I was reading, which I won't get into now, I can understand why they were so upset with Diddy and what they were trying to get him to keep his mouth shut on. Now, but for the fact that some people got protected, there are people walking around in prominent positions who ought to be in a federal penitentiary, and some people who were put in a federal penitentiary to keep them from blowing the whistle on those who really needed to be there. So I have seen that, taken my leisure. It's taken several hours about 3 years ago to read through those laptops. And that's because the technician downloaded them, and he brought the download so we could go over them. That was on something that happened in New Jersey. I think Dana's aware of that. Now, with that said, I will also offer this up. I made a remark about the make believe that is engaged in by these adults for their whole lives. I have known actual organized crime figures and talked to them, and I'm not at liberty to get into what we were talking about in terms of specifics or nor who they were. And one of them was a neighbor of mine. And we've gone over some of the things that you're talking about. And I will say this: some of the people that come across to the public is straight up and down badasses. When you see them deal with the people of power, they fawn and shuffle, look at the ground, and they're acting as obsequious and servile as you can imagine, and you want to gag because your image of these people is as a real live badass the way they come across in public. And then you're watching this and you're going, what in the world? This looks like something out of Django that was being played by Samuel Jackson.
Yeah.
What
All right.
what in the world? And to see people do things to each other, that is a foul industry. It is a lot of money. I used to make, honestly, without counting bonuses and shares, I'd make $250,000 in 5 to 6 hours every day I showed up at the studio. And I'd make more than that by the time you add it in, and I'd be making $1.5 million a day. That's a lot of money for what I used to do ordinarily, 9 to 5, 5 days a week, 360 some days out of the year for decades. Wow, that's a lot of money. But at least I was doing what I had done in the real world. So now you got people that pretend, and they're dealing with a fantasy, and they're getting paid this money. They want to protect it. So they have to please the people with the power of saying, okay, sign on the dotted line. You got the part, or you got the script, or you got the financial deal. But, you got to kiss my behind because I like that kind of thing. That's what I'm about, this person would say.
All
So
right.
you get
So,
these people trying to protect themselves, and I'm not going into it, Dana. Don't worry about it. But over the 15 years that I did this, where I was number 1 or number 2 syndicated show in the country, for God's sake, I had lawyers and staff and investigators. We had to, diffuse, block all kinds of blackmail and extortion attempts so they could get control. Now, I was 50 when I got into this, more than 50. I wasn't 18 or 19 opening the door to get set up because I was too young and immature and inexperienced in life. Now, I'll just pass the mic with that. But you're
Thank
right
you.
on
I
point,
need to
both of you.
say thank you to Shanna Gilmore. Thank you so much for the super chat. And guys, if you are in this space, please like the space, repost the space, and bookmark the space. Peter, you are slipping because you usually make this announcement and
There
you're
was a lot of
slipping.
we were in the throes of a
No,
spirited
you were
discourse.
concerned about having a conversation about the Diddy trial, and I get it, but public service announcements are important. So, guys, please like this space, repost this space, and bookmark this space. Thank you so much. So, I want to go to the Wilson, Fletcher, G. Rich, and Derek, and then we should be able to close up after that. Go ahead, the Wilson. So, if you want a request to come up to say anything, you need to do so in the next 5 minutes, because I'm going to stop taking requests. So, go ahead, the Wilson Magazine. How are you?
He
You
just
have
dropped.
the
It
floor.
looks like he dropped.
Yeah,
Well, I'll bring him back
I've
up.
just brought him back up. Are you there?
Now he's here.
All right, you have the floor,
You
sir.
have the mic. Go ahead.
Right on, man. So, great day to everybody. Big shout out Judge Joe Brown. Um, Listen, I wanted to touch on the accountability aspect that the judge was speaking on earlier. Before I tuned in today, I was going through. I'm dealing with a certain issue, and it just had me thinking. And I had this specific thought today that there really isn't anything wrong with accountability, right? The way that we evade accountability, like it's second nature. Accountability, proper accountability is justice for all. And dealing with the criminal justice system in Los Angeles County, some of the points that were raised here, I've experienced personally just as an indigent defendant. And I was really more inclined to listen because there was a lot of food for thought in this space today. But as far as I remember, the guy earlier was talking about district attorneys, right? And I've been dealing with a case that was under both Biden and Trump, and there's been a critical oversight failure on both the state and federal level, much less the county. Okay, and I just wanted to hear what Judge Joe Brown's take on that pertaining to just the nature of legal professionals in Los Angeles County.
Los Angeles County is a weird place. You have 13 judicial districts in LA County. Years ago, a problem developed because most of the real heavy civil cases occurred in the Central District. The Central District had a pretty eclectic mix of ethnicity. But a lot of folk that were the powers that be didn't like that because they said the typical juror in the Central District was too ignorant to deal with the complexities of these very complicated civil cases that were being heard. So they started drawing the Central District from all around the county rather than from the surrounding area like they did for the other 12. So what wound up happening is LA County eventually became possessed of some very identifiable districts with very, very strong ethnic flavors. One of the brilliant things that Johnny Cochran did, and he and I used to be friends, we talk to each other on the phone, and I'd known him since 1966 at UCLA. He told me one of his things that he tried to get accomplished and got accomplished was getting the OJ case transferred to a judicial district in Los Angeles where there were significant numbers of prospective jurors who, as unfavored ethnics, had experienced Los Angeles Police Department firsthand as they grew up. He set an age parameter on it and some distinctive characteristics, and he pretty much got that jury. And although Nancy Grace was the reporter that presented most of what you heard and what she put out there, this is part of her first effort to become part of Hollywood, was very much inappropriate and not backed by reality. We didn't get what was going on. And a great deal of Cochran's case was because they could prove that LAPD, through various detectives and agencies, had manufactured a great deal of the case. And as a fact, though the press has abdicated its responsibility to report it, at least 4 of the chief detectives in the OJ case wound up going to penitentiaries because they fabricated and planted evidence. And I think 128 people got let out of California prisons in what was known as the Ramparts Precinct scandal because of what they did. And they had it on video, but Nancy Grace never mentioned it. You had to have actually recorded what was going on or looked at it live in order to understand what was shown. So in Los Angeles, there is a very bad problem with the way the system has been stacked because of economic interest who have gotten a paramount position over the simple aims of justice when it comes to everybody else. And that is a big problem. You saw in the Rodney King thing where that was used to the advantage of the police that engaged with Rodney King. And there were, I think, 23% of the people that lived there were retired cops. So their smart lawyers got the case set in that particular district. And what happened? They got acquitted. So they had the various and sundry LA riots in 1992 as a result of the King verdict. But then again, they got indicted in federal court, and the federal court's jury pool was not selected from such a, shall we say, narrow segment of the Los Angeles County population. And they got convictions for violation of civil rights against the officers involved. That's the kind of thing that is a reality in LA. And is frankly too many people there also suffer from a lack of experience, too much crowding, too many rules that obfuscate or confuse what's going on in a crazy system where everybody has to have a cell phone or a pager connection where you get put on 2-hour notice and 1 hour notice that your case is going to trial. And California right now, young man, is so flat broke busted that the system is underfinanced. And on the civil side, they don't have money provided by the state that can operate the civil courts more than 3 days, but for the fact that some of the judges, well, most all of the judges generously donated a large segment of their salaries back so the civil courts can stay open 4 days a week instead of just 3. The system's about to break down, and you're probably caught up in the midst of it.
Right. So real quick, earlier, I remember you had mentioned, a problem with the First Amendment. And, I think a very critical element about a very critical fact about the Constitution is that, the constitutional rights of people, it belongs to the individual, right? These aren't things that we're asking the government for. Our rights belong to the individual. So if rights belong to the individual, how come, courts tend to, you know, uh, 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 deflect upward, like when they violate a defendant's constitutional rights within the proceedings?
Habit.
If that makes sense.
Habit. And also an
Right, but
unfortunate.
but I'm talking about the redress mechanism.
I know.
Right.
Here's the thing. Law has gotten complicated, and select interests who have a big financial stake in it have driven the cost of doing business up to astronomical levels. Take uh, Title VII discrimination in employment. It costs so much to prosecute a Title VII case. That's discrimination based on race, color, creed, national origin, religion, sex, age, or physical condition.
Yeah, the protected classes. Yeah.
Yeah, but they can't prosecute it because they just lost their job. And the lawyers want enormous retainers in order to go forth and deal with the cases, because unlike when the laws were passed in the late 60s, it's gotten so incredibly complex now that it costs a lot of money that a broke somebody just got fired can't hire a lawyer or retain one. and they don't want to deal with it on contingency fee situations anymore, where if I don't win, you don't have to pay me anything. I get a percentage of what you get. They want it right now, right up front, because they were on the track to not be professionals in what they do, but to use what they do to earn money, and they turn it into a job situation rather than a profession. So we have that kind of thing operating. So the whole system has gotten so complicated and top heavy with red tape that it's difficult to work through. And you have another thing too, people are appointed as judges who, in my opinion, totally lack the necessary experience and acumen and longevity in the practice of law to be judges, because they're rookies. You have people that are recognized as national experts on civil rights who've never tried a case in front of a jury. You have people that are supposed to be legal experts that if you sit down and question them in a classroom situation, they know little about the law. You have people that are 10 years out of law school, have yet to try their first case, but they get big money because they work in a law firm doing penny ante research just to generate billable hours in a huge library that has nothing to do with the case. So, I mean, it's like going, I say this over and over to get people to understand it. It's like going into a hospital or a doctor's office, seeing the wall covered with the degrees that the doctor has, and then finding that this would be physician has never been an intern or a resident and has no hands on experience. That's what you're getting in law now. That's what we were talking about with Conjay Jackson. She scratches her head under her wig. And okay, how many cases have you tried? You were a public defender at one time for a short while, but what have you done in the real world having some heavyweight first class jury trials? What kind of appeals have you done? And there are people on the Supreme Court who've never had a case as a lawyer, never tried an appellate case. And they are sitting there. I know somebody that was being considered got out of law school. 4 months after being out of law school, they were made a circuit court judge, unlimited jurisdiction. And within 14, 16 months of getting out of law school, they were a federal judge. Now they sit on a court of appeals. And they've never had a case. So, I mean, what are you going to get when you
Wow.
have a system like that? And son, you get caught up in it, but it's politics, and maybe the people that have some input into who gets these appointments, who gets selected to be these judges, they need to be questioned rather than talking about some of the nonsense they are bringing up right now, like your mayor out there in Los Angeles,
Yeah, yeah. The
considering,
mayor, no one asked for it.
yeah. And
She's an
then the other
avowed
thing too
communist. She
is,
used to go hang out with Fidel Castro down in Cuba.
yeah, but see,
Insane.
the bad thing about it
She just
is,
sucks.
how can you deal with a justice system that has its primary input from a mayor like Los Angeles had, who every other time she opens her mouth and deals with something official, she's violating United States Code Title 8, Section 1324, that deals with illegal aliens, conspiracy, aiding and abetting, advising, counseling, procuring, giving aid and a comfort thereto, which carries some serious felony time. And nobody's held her to account for it.
Yeah. All right. So
Yeah, sorry.
no, real quick, let me say again, thank you again to Shanna Gilmore on YouTube for the lovely super chat. Thank you to FK Simps as well. He says you rock, Dana, and Just Joe Brown. P.S. I love your hair, Dana. Thank you. And thank you, Shannon, again for gifting a membership to Catalia. So thank you guys. Please like and on repost the video on YouTube or on your social media outlets. So thank you so much for supporting. And go ahead, the Wilson, land your
Wait,
planes, and I
Dan,
have to
I
go
have, I
to
have,
G Rich and then Derek. Go ahead. What you
I
saying?
got one quick
Uh,
question for the judge before Wilson continues. Just in regards to what's going on with Diddy as well, Judge. It, the prosecution in their closing also said that there was no reason for Cassie to lie. She already got paid the 20 million and the 10 million from the Intercontinental. But my question was, well, she would have reason to lie, because if she lies on the stand, couldn't that then give the possibility for Diddy and his civil litigation attorneys to claw back the 20 million because she's contradicting what she said to get the 20 million in the first place?
No,
Is
but
there an ability to do that?
they could file a claim on it, but actually, pragmatically, no. And people do lie, but lying is not necessarily perjury. Perjury is something that supposedly affects the outcome of a trial. For example, you have an eyewitness to an armed robbery of a liquor store. He looked the perpetrator right in the face in good lighting and can ID him. Well, what he was doing was dropping off his side old lady, and he certainly doesn't want his wife to know that. So he gets on the stand, and when they ask him about it, he said he was going to get some cigarettes, not I was dropping off my lady friend and I don't want my wife to know. So he's lied about that. But if he tells the truth about what he saw, fine. You get a situation with Stormy Daniels and President Trump. What's going on with Stormy Daniels? Well, if you listen with a critical ear to the case, it's pretty obvious that under New York law and anybody else's law, Stormy Daniels was potentially guilty of blackmailing Donald Trump. That's a felony. So the prosecution approaches her after they find out about the settlement and they threaten her with prosecution for blackmail if she doesn't go along with them. They get this woman in the Diddy case that they find out about her multi-million dollar civil suit, and they say, hey, we want Diddy because we need him out of the way. And you've got a new husband, you have all this money, but we're going to prosecute you for complicity because actually you aided and abetted him in doing what we think we can get on him. So there are these threats that people get. I had a real live case dealing with what they've got against Diddy with two school teachers. Dana, I'll be very brief on this. What happened is these guys had dated in high school, dated in college. They went on, they got married, got divorced. They were school teachers, right? It's a guy and a girl. They meet up in West Memphis, Arkansas at a conference. They hang out for about an hour and decide, hey, let's go investigate it to see if the spark's still there. So one of them leaves their car in the parking lot of this motel and they drive back to Memphis, Tennessee across the bridge. Well, DEA was very interested in the guy's older brother who was a drug dealer. So they were following him, hoping to find out some information because they were looking for the brother. Well, they found him going into a hotel with this woman after they shopped at a department store and he bought her, I think it was a purse and some shoes. Okay. So he and she go to a hotel room while they're having sex. The feds bust in and charge them with the Mann Act, transporting a female across state lines from Arkansas to Tennessee for illicit purposes to have sex. So they were prosecuting him to get him to flip and turn evidence against his older brother. He didn't really know anything about his older brother because they didn't speak to each other and hadn't seen each other for years. So I beat his case, but that's what you had the same kind of thing there, where they go after somebody and threaten prosecution if you don't cooperate. So I imagine what they did with the Biden administration being what it is or was, they threatened this woman and said, we heard about your lawsuit. If you don't cooperate with us, there's some big time trouble. So she said, oh, heck no, I'll go along with it. Hell, that part of the equation they get pretty right with Hollywood when you see the movies where the detectives always threatening somebody with that.
All right. G Rich and then Derek.
All right. Good evening,
How you
everyone.
doing?
Uh, I'm doing fine, Dana. It's lovely to hear
Hey,
your voice
counselor,
and talk to you. Hey, Judge. Yeah, we just got off the phone
off the
talking
phone.
about this. Yeah. Shout out to everyone. To your co-host, Peter, I just want to say kudos on mentioning Morris Levy in the music industry. You're right about the mafia and how music industry in part got started, especially the jukeboxes that used to. Of course, you can find them at Waffle House now, but the jukeboxes, and I'm showing my age, that used to exist in certain places. The mafia used to own a lot of those operations, and that was a way to collect money. But an interesting note, Morris Levy, who you mentioned, he was the highlight of the movie Why Do Fools Fall in Love, about how he ripped off Frankie Lyman by putting his name on a song that he wrote. And Morris Levy was actually a mentor, and I learned this to Alan Klein. And Klein was Sam Cooke's manager. He was also managed the Beatles and Elvis at one point, and it's been speculated he had a role in his death. But that is another story.
Yeah,
Uh,
Rich. The reason I know is because my grandfather was in that family. He was a captain. So we
in the Vedro Genovese
Oh,
family.
Peter, I didn't know you
correct.
was connected.
Oh,
That's why you are the way you are. Okay.
okay, that's interesting to know.
I'm a
So,
legit guy though. This is my grandfather's been dead since a long time. So me and my dad are legit guys. But yeah, but they used to go out to dinner with Morris, and my grandfather was very. I'll just leave it at that for now.
okay. Cool. Well, I'm gonna have to follow Pete because I got to get some. You've piqued my interest on stuff. But, um, look. Oh, so to address something though, and Peter, you even mentioned this earlier, and the judge I think was disagreeing with you. My understanding about the perjury incident and whether Cass has to lie. Remember something in this trial that's come up. First off, this trial is a waste of money. It's a waste of time. Uh, the case was outside the statute of limitations from the beginning with the state. So the prosecutors, the feds, brought the charges to make basically rock and roll stars into mobsters. And essentially, what I'm stating is we're talking about behavior that has been going on, like Judge says, this is Hollywood, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And now that's being part of a RICO charge. They couldn't bring these charges in state court. Remember the police department when the video with Cassie came out, he said it was outside the statute of limitations. Why? Because it was a battery. Let's not forget when you watch the video carefully, they try to make it look like he was trying to drag her back to a part. I don't know if I could say ex party or
Freak
sex. I
off.
don't
Freak off.
a freak off. Well,
Yep.
sex party freak off. But if you notice, he's holding a towel in his hand. Cassie has his phone and some bags, and then later on in the video, he's got the phone. Well, what the defense has stated and argued, she took his phone. Now, I'm not defending. By no means, I'm not defending Diddy his behavior, but these are two drug addicts. These are two people, swingers, as what Mark Agnafilio stated, that were into some freaky shit. And why are we wasting taxpayer money on this thing? And you got to point out this too, Judge, as lawyers, first and foremost, we're officers of the court. If there is perjured testimony that is being offered, and keep in mind, Cassie, it came out that one of the witnesses, they had been comparing notes. Cassie had been comparing messages with her, especially about her lawsuit. So there is still a lawsuit, I think, with one of the alleged victims against Diddy, I think, for $10 million. So there's financial recourse in here. But the main thing for me, the woman by the name of Brianna Bordelon, supposedly she said she's the one that Diddy dangled over the balcony. Keep in mind, the defense attorneys brought this up and they made a mistrial motion on this. P. Diddy was in New York at the time. He was not in Los Angeles, where she said this happened. And it's my understanding the defense attorneys caught this and they had presented the information, and the prosecutors knew that Diddy was not there when she said it. They had to have gone over this testimony because this is their witness. Remember, they prep their witnesses before they get on the witness stand about this. So if they knew that, and they knew it was false and it was lying, they had a duty not to present that in court. And they had a duty to disclose that to the judge. And the judge apparently said, there's no mistrial here. He said, if it's a credibility issue, we're going to let the jurors say this. But my understanding from what one of the people who've been there at the trial, and this is important to everybody, stop listening to ABC, NBC, and CBS because they have a narrative they're trying to reach with this stuff. You got to listen to the people who are actually independent and don't have ties to these corporations that are present watching this stuff. But my understanding, the judge was like, well, they were all, from what someone stated, the judge actually said, well, he was going to let it go through because, they were all doing drugs and so forth, and they all could be perjuring. Excuse me?
You can't allow this. This
Yeah,
is
Rich,
not again.
this case is going
It's
to be toast. I've been going. I went
it's not
24
about just.
days.
It's not about saying Diddy's a good guy. That's not the case. I've represented judge just like you said. I've had to represent bad, shitty people. And just to clarify, Dana, I had to represent guy who was selling drugs, a drug, had a very bad history. He was charged with domestic abuse battery and flight from an officer and driving on suspended license. The jury didn't want, the district attorneys didn't want to give him no slack. We had affidavits showing from the alleged victim the man didn't have anything, didn't hurt her, didn't do anything. She didn't want to press charges. They still wanted to proceed. She didn't even want to testify. At the last minute, she came to court and I had to call her as a witness because the judge, I did what's called a motion for direct verdict. The judge wouldn't grant it. And at the last minute, she came and she testified. She said she made the whole thing up. The reason she did it, she said he was on Facebook looking at other girls.
Mm-mm.
And this is the father of her children. She could have gotten him killed because she called the police. And there was a chase that was involved. That's a felony. That's Mr. But nothing happened. So the point I'm making with that, yeah, is this stuff goes on. It goes on every day. This case, yes, I think if it goes to an appellate court, let's say Diddy gets convicted on at least two of the counts, he's still, and let's say I think he's going to be found not guilty, obviously on the RICO. But I would say this: if it goes to an appellate court and judge, you can. I don't know if what your opinion is on it, but if it goes to an appellate court or anybody can comment, it's gonna get tossed. Just like they have to toss the Weinstein case. Weinstein got a mistrial.
Mm.
They came back with a partial verdict. His case got then tossed because the jurors were supposedly afraid to come out. I mean, this whole and tying it, and finally, I'm about to land my plane. We got to go back to the rule of law and not on the rule of emotions, which is what the mass media is trying to push. We're not focused on evidence, we're focused on people's feelings. You know, Cassie made out with a $30 million judgment. I mean, $30 million settlement. And I'm not saying, of course, that's a hell of a payday. Now, if Diddy gets convicted, and people got to remember this too, and Peter, I think you'll know this as well, there is something called civil forfeiture, which will happen if he gets convicted on this stuff. The government's going to try and take his assets. And his son, Diddy's son, is also being sued for some stuff too, along with Diddy. So I think this is a ploy. This is my opinion. Several things. Diddy went after Ciroc, which was a problem. He has also on these freak off videos, I think he has pictures and videos of certain people. So let's just say politicians in compromising positions. And thirdly, to go after his money and seize it because we're seeing a trend, especially now, where you're filing these lawsuits against these, especially black celebrities. Look at Smokey Robinson. My God, at 85 years old, he's being sued for Me Too, accused of sexual assault. Then you have, and Tyler Perry, but that's neither here nor there. That's another story. But I'm just seeing it. What I'm pointing out, Dana, is this trend now since the Me Too movement started. You don't have to have direct evidence. All you have to do is have an accusation, and it sticks with you.
Mhm. Yeah.
Don't have to have no proof, nothing.
You're
Just
spot on.
accuse me, and that's it.
You're spot on, Rich, and it's a major problem. And hopefully, we can introduce sanity back into the equation with this administration, this Justice Department, and having conversations like these. The issue is the media. The media is the problem, like you said. They're literally priming and programming everybody to be pussified and punkified. That's my own word, like Judge would say with his Carmelo case as well. And we need to restore what it means to be a man again, and what it means to be a woman. It's going to lead to the end of us if we don't do it. I mean, we're seeing it right now in 4K. So it starts here with conversations like these, and we need to elect people who are going to stand up to these people, and that's the only way we take the country back.
All right. I want to go to Derek. Go ahead, Derek. Derek probably fell asleep. Thank you for waiting, Derek.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
Let
Yep,
me
you.
add
we
Sorry.
can hear
something.
you.
Let
Sorry,
me add a
Derek.
Good.
brief
Hey,
remark.
good evening, Dana and Judge. Sorry about
Let
that.
me add some kudos. The last speaker, Attorney Richard, is a practicing criminal trial lawyer, so he knows his business and what he's talking about. And by the way, I was not disagreeing with Peter. I was going along with it. I was just backing up my inference that lying is such a ubiquitous part of the process that nobody really gives it the attention that it ought to get.
All right.
So
All right.
I'm not in disagreement with that.
All right. Go ahead, Derek.
Good to know.
All right, all right. Good evening.
Good evening.
So I wanted to make a statement and then I want to ask Judge a question. My statement is this. I hear so many people that, and I get it, right? I understand that people don't want people accused of anything that they're not guilty of, right? We want blind justice. We want fair justice. We don't want people getting accused and ran through the muck and maybe their financial status being at jeopardy because of litigations and all of these things. And I totally agree with that. But I'm also aware of the Me Too, and I'm also aware of there's a lot of people that are getting caught in the melee that are being drugged because they have financial status and some type of star reputation, celebrity status, or whatever. But in this case with Diddy, I don't think that's the case. I think Diddy is in this situation because Diddy is a piece of shit. He's a low down, dirty guy. I had a friend from New York when I used to go down in the '90s. He grew up with Diddy, and he was telling me stuff about Diddy back in the freaking '90s. Diddy is a piece of shit. He's a low down, dirty dude. I honestly really don't care if they do add stuff on him that don't, because he should be on trial now for murders. He should be on trial for all of the low down, grimy shit he has done, and he's not even being charged with that. So a RICO is really, to me, that's a slap on the hand from all of the stuff that he should be getting charged with. It's mighty funny that this guy, three people that are associated with him, somehow comes up poisoned. Diddy's been a agent of chaos since young. It's followed him all the days of his life. And my professor told me a long time ago. He said, one person or two people could be lying on you, right? One person say something, two people say something, it could be a lie. But when it's that many people saying something, it got to be the truth, right? So, I want Diddy to face the punishment that he deserves. Now the question is, I want to ask you, Judge, because I've been kind of following what's going on with this. But I know one thing I know about the feds, and I've had some run-ins in my lifetime. I've never really seen a federal case when they're willing to spend this amount of money and put this amount of time into it, just like get thrown out. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's very rare that I have seen it or witnessed it happen. Do you think that of all of this, Diddy will walk? Because for some reason, some of these celebrities seem to believe that. Michael Blackson of late talking about, oh yeah, he's gonna walk free and all of this stuff. And a lot of people and they applaud it, which I don't even understand. That's a whole nother story. But um, do you think that this
Okay,
man? Do you think that he will walk
I don't
free?
want to cut you off, but I think I know where you're going.
Right.
There's a big elephant in the room. It's got absolutely nothing to do with Diddy's guilt or innocence. The big elephant is when you have a trial like this, your primary interest is not Diddy. Your primary interest is to keep the U.S. government or a state government that is in the federal system representing 360 million people, with all of the resources that entails, ganging up on one person and getting used to abusing the law. That is entirely more dangerous to the republic than anything any one person can do. All right. Second consideration is some of our most cherished rights were developed in the name of some of the most vile people. One of the most important rights we enjoy is in the Fifth Amendment, the right to be free from being compelled to incriminate yourself. That is known as the Miranda right. Miranda was a low down scoundrel, and his own homies killed him eventually. But we have Miranda rights where people recognize that they have a right to be free from self incrimination and cannot be compelled to give evidence against themselves. But we call it Miranda, even though Miranda was a horrible person. That stands for the proposition that justice is blind and you cannot concern yourself with who's on trial. You can only concern yourself with the law and the issues on trial and the evidence, because justice is blindfolded. She is not supposed to see who's standing in front of her. Now, it doesn't always work that way. And as I alluded to earlier, Biden, Stennis, Byrd, 45 years ago, passed some amendments to the federal criminal codes that allow the federal prosecutors to deliberately persecute someone with no firm odds on getting a conviction, just to use the process to bankrupt them, neutralize them, or disable or discourage them to the point where they are no longer perceived as a political threat. That is not how our system is supposed to work, and that needs very, very quick address and modification by statute or action by the U.S. Supreme Court. So, with that, I will say, okay, fine, pass the mic.
All right, who
Um,
was it? Was still Derek. Were you done, Derek, or go ahead?
yeah, I just want to say, and I totally understand what you're saying, Judge, and of course, we just witnessed that happening with President Trump and many other political figures. I'm totally against that, but I just know that Diddy really he deserves worse than probably what's happening to him. Do I want fair justice, swift justice? Of course. I don't want to see anybody get railroaded or accused of anything that they shouldn't be. But I believe that a lot of the things that they are charging him with, he has had some type of involvement with, if not indirectly, not directly, indirectly. And I just think that I don't see, and I respect y'all because y'all are real judges. I'm not, but I don't see the feds just saying just okay, let's just scrap this and that's done, and we're just gonna charge him with some bubblegum charges, or we're not gonna charge him with anything at all, and just let him walk away. I just
What do you mean
but
scrap it? They're the
Well,
jury's deliberating. They went through everything already.
yeah,
He's
nothing's been
yeah, but
yeah
scrapped.
what is
he's
so yeah? You saying for last time I checked, it was only four. So you saying they've deliberated on the fifth one
Can
too?
I
no, they're
can
deliberating
I
now.
respond?
Go ahead, Rich.
No, well, let me just say no. They're deliberating right now, and what happened was that there were 5 counts. They had a partial verdict on 4 of the counts 2 through 5, but they couldn't
Exactly,
agree on count one.
because of one juror, right?
But
It was
no, it's not just one. It wasn't one juror. That wasn't you, and that's another thing. So what you're talking about is what happened yesterday when they said there was one juror who said he didn't want to follow instructions. That has nothing to do with what they did on the verdict today with regards to why they couldn't come up with count one, but count one being the most severe. But let me just say this: I I I have a friend who was thinking the same things that you were saying about Diddy and how he was a bad guy. She even said she thought he had something to do with Tupac's death, but she actually was at the trial and she said she started getting upset and crying because she saw what was going on and how they were tipping the scales. This is what she stated in favor of the prosecution and railroading the man. Now, that's up for debate. People have their opinion. You have to be there. I'm not there. But we can't ever and want an abuse of justice because don't like someone. That's just not how I am. That's not something we should wish on anybody. Because think of this: if it could be done to, and we've seen countless examples of black men who have been, going back from the days of the lynch mobs that they've had, the trials they've had, like the Scottsboro Boys, the George Steinman Juniors, and so forth. We can't have an abuse of power by our government. And we have to hold the government in check when things are like that. So the question is, yeah, and Diddy may be guilty of some of the things that we don't know of. Yeah, but nothing's been brought forward. And I can't just he's got something here. I want to throw this at him. Because if you do that, then think of the other countless men who don't have the money. Think he has some of the top defense attorneys in the country: Brian Steele, Mark Agnifilio. A lot of young black men can't get that. So just
So
imagine if they're doing that to him, what they would do to poor black folks.
so let me just
Yeah,
ask
I
this
mean,
one question, and I'm gonna land my plane.
go
So
ahead.
you gonna sit here and tell me that every single allegation that's been brought against Diddy is probably just somebody disliking him, and then you're gonna say that Diddy is gonna walk away from this scot free? Like,
I didn't say that.
it
I
kind of sounds
said
like you
that
did.
no, you got to
what do you
listen
mean? What do you
carefully. What do
mean
you
by
mean?
every
Wait,
every
let me
allegation?
respond to him. Wait, hold up a second. You're saying walk away. The man, they've already came and reached a partial verdict on the, it sounds like the predicate offenses.
But we don't
So
know the
he's not
verdict. What is the
likely, wait,
verdict? What is it?
the verdict hasn't been decided
Okay, that's
yet.
what I'm
But I
saying.
said
So we
it's,
don't know.
no, but no, you asked me a question. So why don't give me a chance to respond? I said that it's a predicate. The more severe charge hasn't been debated yet. He's likely not going to walk scot free, but I don't believe he's going to do a life sentence. And the point that I'm saying to you, because as an attorney and looking at it, you can't tell me that the prosecutors didn't have a problem with their case, because clearly they had. And the evidence that they had, because you have attorneys like and judges like Judge Joe who have talked about it, and others, was weak. It was weak. They had nothing. How do you prove a RICO, a racketeering? You're charging someone with racketeering RICO, like the RICO charge, and you go back. Why it was created was to go after the mafia. If what you're saying is Diddy was engaging in mafia-like behavior with having sex with all of these women and sharing drugs and so forth, what about all the countless rock and roll stars who did the same thing? Hell, what about Hugh Hefner?
But they're not on
That's the
trial
point.
though.
Well,
Diddy is.
No, they're not on trial, but that's the point of this. That's the point. Is that going to be next?
counselor,
Derek, that's one
If
of the
he was
let me
points that
help
was
you out,
driving,
raised,
counselor.
it's a selective prosecution. That's what Agnifilo was basically putting into the jury's mind the other day.
correct.
You have to understand this is the charging decision stays with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the DOJ. They decide what cases are made or not made. And so this was selective against this individual for a specific purpose, excuse me. And I have to agree with both Rich and the judge. When you allow this to happen, it makes all of us less free. And for individuals who don't have $1 billion net worth that could put 8 attorneys,
Thank
top
you.
crack defense attorneys on, will be finished. They'll put us under the jail.
But
And
they've
so
been
you
doing
should
that
be
for years for people that even low profile people. They've been doing this for
so
years. It's nothing new.
so why but why would we want to why would we want to
But why
expand
would
it?
you want
We
it?
want to
I
we
don't
want to
want it. I don't
circumscribe
want it. I
we
want
want we
Okay,
want to
but you can't
reduce the
throw. But
power of
you.
the federal government. I don't want power.
I don't want it,
I
but
want it reduced to nothing.
I don't want it,
But
but
you
I
want
want
Diddy
people who
gone. Is
do.
why you're in favor of it. You want Diddy to be punished.
If I could interrupt a
If he's
second,
guilty,
let me put this out there. The most important thing in a criminal trial is not so much the guilt or innocence of a given defendant. He's presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The main issue that the Bill of Rights is there for is to ensure that the government does not use its power to oppress. So, step one is the gorilla, the monster bull elephant. What is the government doing? Let me give you an example. You've been to a Super Bowl party, I'm sure, right?
correct.
Okay. You've bet on the outcome. They have little games, who's going to be ahead by so many points on the second quarter. Okay. In damn near every state in the union, that's illegal. Let's suppose that you got 10 rookie cops who want to make a name and they weren't listening during training, but now they're out on their own and they say, there's an organized gambler that lives in this block or he stays in this block visiting his brother and he's running an organized racket. I don't know which house, but it's the Super Bowl, so you can guarantee that they're running some kind of gambling. Let's go crash all these houses and see if we can catch him because I know he's up in here. They've been seeing his car going back and forth. So they come break in your house, your neighbor's house, everybody's house on the block. they bust about 35, 40 people for illegal gambling, trying to get this organized crime figure, so to speak, who's running a gambling bookie joint in one of these houses. They don't know which. Now, what's wrong with this big picture? See, whether or not this guy is a real legitimate bookie running illicit gambling on a big scale, that's one thing. But what about all of the other people who've had their rights violated, and these 10 young cops who are now in the habit of saying, we have the power because we've got guns on our hips and the access. So to hell with everybody else's rights. Let's go kick in the doors and see if we can make some bust. See, that's the big danger, not this professional bookie running the game at one of these residences that's on this block.
Let me interject real quick. Not RC. It was B boy. I sent you a message. So he said he was up here, but he got knocked out. So nobody isn't dropping anybody. It has to be a connection issue. And I saw Carrie. I brought her up, and I don't know if she left or hopefully she didn't get knocked out. So it's probably a connection issue because nobody isn't dropping anybody. So if you guys want to request to come up, please do so now because we're going to be wrapping up soon. All right. I know RC had his hand up, so I wanted to swing back to him. And so I guess it's just open platform right now. But RC, you wanted to say something? And maybe not.
That's and to Judge's point, what he just explained, right? Like that invites people, the regular citizens, to say, "Wait a second, these guys are running around like a mafia themselves. They're going around and using this to enrich themselves or to make cases or so they could run for political office." If you look at all these prosecutors who are doing this, what do they usually do? They run for office after that. What do they campaign on? I was a proud defender of the streets. I cleaned everybody up. Look what I did. I am the sword and the shield of justice. It's a dog and pony show. And that the general public doesn't see this, and I'm not blaming them because they're idiots. A lot of them are, but they're so busy in their regular lives, they don't have the time to actually inspect the boulder dash, the nonsense that comes out of these people's mouths when they're running for office, and they don't realize that this is all just one hand washing the other. And so when you allow that to happen, you then allow another group to rise up and say, hey, listen, we're getting taken advantage over here, and now why don't you come to us and let us be the authority? So you actually knock and reduce the legitimacy of the government when you allow them to run roughshod over everybody. So it's important to check the government and to make sure they're doing things the right way. And the way that it's been done in this case is totally out of bounds. I've been in that courtroom 23 days. I've been in the overflow room because I don't feel like paying a line sitter $35 an hour to get a seat in the main room because there's only 14 seats. But what I've seen has been a miscarriage, and no, not even a miscarriage, an abortion of justice against Sean Combs. And I don't care what happens to Diddy. I don't know him from a hole in the wall. What I do care about is the precedent that this sets to allow the government to go into the private lives of individuals and target individuals who have deep pockets so they can take their money. And that's a dangerous
I just
precedent to
think
set.
that Diddy
Yeah.
is very powerful. I think he uses his money, and and they've done it in the past many times to bring down gangsters who were powerful, who had a lot of influence, who put fear in people. And I think sometimes they have to bend the rules to do it. I'm not for it. I don't want anybody. I don't want the government running roughshod. I don't want the law system, screwing over people. I know how they feel. I've been there before. But I think that when there's smoke, there's fire. And I think when people have the type of influence that Diddy has, sometimes you and Judge, I'm sure you're well aware, and I know you witnessed some things. People have to kind of do some things, maybe even stretch some things out to be able to get these people to stop him because Diddy is a monster. He can't stop himself.
How do you say he was a monster? That's crazy.
Well, he
Let
is.
me let me
He
let me ask
is.
you let me ask you a question, Derek. Let me ask you a question. How would you feel about the U.S. government working with individuals who sexually traffic and rape small children? How do you feel
I
about that?
think anybody who gets caught doing anything with a child should have a bullet put in their head. I don't even think they should have a
Okay,
trial.
okay. There's something called a Category 1 asset, right? That the individuals in the military who have to deal with Category 1 assets, they have to be signed off on to be able to deal with those individuals from the Secretary of State. So we put a national security value on a category one asset that does some of the most unspeakable things on the face of the planet, that we allow them to do those things, and we operate with that individual because of the national security implications of the people they're able to expose and get around. Do you are you okay with that going on
Absolutely not.
with your money?
I'm actually aware of that, but no, I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay
Okay,
with illegal things, but what I am okay with is when someone has done things and they have an influence and they cannot stop themselves, and there is plenty of witnesses that are saying these people are doing these things. There's people that haven't even come forward that have witnessed and have went through things with Diddy. You know, you probably don't know that. Nobody knows everybody, but I'm just telling you. I've talked to
I know
people.
the things you're talking about. That
Right.
Diddy
So
used to
all I'm
rape
saying
rape
is
people. He used to put things in
all
people's
types
drinks
of
and then
stuff, all
rape them.
types of
Yeah,
stuff.
I got you.
Well,
I
I'm
hear
just
you.
saying, when you have a person like that who can't stop themselves, they have to be stopped, and they have to be stopped by any means necessary.
Well,
If
Derek, real quick, and then I'm gonna go to B Boy and Sway Me. But when you say stop themselves from doing what? Because what he does, first of all, he hits women, so that's wrong. But so do a lot of other people, and they're not charged with RICO. But stop him from doing something that he does privately in his bedroom.
No, I'm not speaking on the sexual aspect of it,
Okay,
because that, yeah, I don't care what he does in his bedroom, as long as he's not, like, forcing anybody. But we
right.
look at the things though, Dana. He's drugging. Plenty of people have witnessed, testify that he's giving them drugs without them even knowing.
I don't
He's
think they, I don't who testified to that because that was never proven, and that was never proven. I don't remember that in
It
any of the
wasn't.
witnesses. Y'all
It
can
wasn't. It's
correct
a
me if
lot.
I'm
It's
wrong.
It
hearsay.
wasn't. It wasn't.
It's
And these.
hearsay.
This is the thing when you. This is the thing. If you're not at the trial, like I was stating earlier, and paying attention and listening, you're getting a narrative from the news media who have a perspective they want you to follow. Now, like I say again, Diddy, yeah, I think is a piece of shit. At the same time, we can't afford our justice system to abuse their power. And it has happened before when they tried to do it against Dr. Cosby, and Judge knows all about that. And that's why his conviction got overturned. There's such thing as overreach. You can't just allow stuff to keep going on and using it for a personal vendetta. That's not what our justice system should be about.
Yeah. All right. So
That's what they do in the Soviet Union.
yeah, I want to go to B Boy, then Sway Me,
Let me say this
and
real
then I
quick.
want to say something. Go ahead.
Promise won't take 30 seconds, Dana. Look, would you rather worry about Diddy, which that doesn't bother me because I wouldn't worry about somebody like that. I can take care of it myself. But would you worry about the full force of a raid team by the FBI hooked up with Homeland Security and DEA busting in 80 or 90 of them armed with the latest high tech stuff because they've gotten used to the idea that anytime one of their prosecutors says go, they can go bust you? That's the real danger, not a Diddy.
All
See,
right.
there are
All right.
360 million people in the United States that are represented by the people of the United States of America versus so and so versus just 5 or 6 folk in Diddy's entourage. See, that's where the real danger is, and that's what this is about, to stop that from happening, because it's all too easy for somebody to come up with the latest edition of a swastika and start goose stepping in and going Zeke Heil, and everybody's supposed to use this structure that's now set up to deal with crime to keep him or her in office so they can dictate where you go, when you do it, what you hear, what you see, what you can say.
All
See,
right. I want to go to B
I
Boy.
passed the mic.
I want to go to B Boy, then Sway Me. Go ahead, B Boy.
Hey, peace, Dana. Can you hear me okay? I got my headphones in. I can take it off if you
Yeah,
can't hear me
you, I can
clearly.
hear
We
you.
feels sounds good. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Peace to you, Peter, everybody in the room, and peace to you, Judge Joe Brown. I'm going to try to make it really brief, and I'm really glad this conversation is being had. And I'm also very glad that this, I came in a little late, but yes, I agree. And just to parrot some points that were made previously, this will set a horrible precedent for the common person. Myself, I am a survivor of a woman putting these types of false sexual accusations against me. And I'm just a young entrepreneur. I nowhere near Diddy status, and I'm still rebuilding from this. Of course, the case that I had was with a woman that I was involved with on the music scene. I'm a musician, amongst other things. This woman fell on hard times. Me and her were together, and then it got to a point where she got evicted from her place, and we were on and off. And then so I said, hey, if you can come to my place and get on your feet, and as long as everything's gonna be cool. Long story short, it didn't work out. I told her to leave. When I told her to leave, she made up these false charges that I sexually assaulted her, that I did this and I did that. And judge, correct me if I'm wrong. This is the only type of charge where no evidence is needed. It's just a simple word. Now, fast forward, and I want to give the judge some credit. The judge did say I had a public defender who went completely to bat for me, and he got me off of these charges because I was innocent of all these charges. But one of the reasons why he got me off is that this woman was consistently doing this to seven, eight other men right before me. She would make false charges, have them locked up, put a restraining order on them so they couldn't go back to their apartment, take over their apartment, and repeat the same thing over and over and over again. And this woman has probably done it. This is going on 3 years ago. She's probably done it to several other men since then. So yes, this sets a horrible precedent, regardless of how you feel about Diddy. And I'd like to see what the judge says about what I'm saying. But yes, a common person like me or any other person, this is probably happening all over the place. And if Diddy is found guilty of these charges, then it's just a free for all for men, especially black men. So I'll land there, Dana. Thank you for giving me the floor, and I'd love to hear what the judge has to say about what I just said.
I could make it in one word. Amen. That is a very important consideration. Now, this, see, I've seen and I know people in government. I won't say who, but the law office I was with has represented U.S. congressmen, U.S. senators, hell, a vice president of the United States of America and former presidential candidate himself. And we've had presidents up in our office consulting and stuff like that. And I've talked to those people. I was on speaking basis with at least two other presidents of the United States of America. And I've met a lot of people that are the movers and shakers. And some of them are good people and some of them are not. Some of them are real scary when it comes to their motivation. Some of them have decent motives. So, this mix of humanity demands a response, which is most importantly, you have to understand what our Constitution is about. It's a compromise to bring 13 separate small nations together. And it's a set of laws that tries to balance several things. One, what is ideal and what is possible with run of the mill humanity, what is possible when humanity rises to its best. What happens when you have a wise public and what happens when you have a dumb public? What happens when you have people who are conscientious and people who are scoundrels? How do you meet somewhere in the middle to make it all work without having a dictatorship or without having something that's so laissez-faire that nothing gets done? See, it's a balance, and you have to rely upon humanity. One of our problems today is that for 55 years, we've had an increasingly effective mainstream and small term media. Technology has changed so that it is very, very effective. It has become populated by people who do not care and have agendas that they want to push by any means necessary. And over a half century, we've been acclimated to glorifying dysfunction and forgetting the rules and dealing with expediency rather than principle. You can't get a preacher to preach about sin from the pulpit anymore. Half of them are pulpit pimps trying to get money so they can get a better car home or a better set of women or boys to play with. We don't have anybody that's real life heroes in our public scene anymore. They call a basketball player or a football player a hero, but we don't have any war heroes who are lauded. We don't have any people that put it all on the line trying to get something right. Something has happened, and we need somebody to turn this whole bit around. We need somebody's plural. And I think right now we've got that movement, but the movement is a shock to those who have become too acclimated to what was happening, and they don't like it because it scares the hell out of them. So we have a negative reaction, and most of the people on this particular space, I would hazard to say white, black, brown, red, yellow, you're more on the conservative side. You are more likely to be concerned with right than you are about some obscure cause. But you still have questions just because you exist in this republic and they're not answering them now. Neither in school, neither from the governmental pulpits that are out there, and especially not from the media outlets. So that's why we have these spaces to investigate why we are here, what we do, and what we are about. I pass the mic.
All right, Sway Me, and Sway Me will be the last, and then I'll go around let everyone have their last comments. Is she still up here? Yes. Go ahead, Sway Me. And thank you again,
Good
You got
evening.
RC
Dana.
up here too, just to let
Morning.
you know, Dana.
Shanna, thank you
Sorry.
again so much for the super chat. I wanted to say that. Go ahead, Sway Me.
Oh, good evening, or I should say, grand rising is already midnight. To you, Dana, Judge Joe Brown, Peter, for hosting the space. I wish I could have gotten in here earlier, but the 14th Amendment. I am so happy about the SCOTUS and their ruling on the injunctions, but I am very excited about what's to come in October on their ruling on the 14th Amendment. And I have this theory that if they don't align with the original intent of the 14th Amendment, America is gone. Because then that is saying that the legislative branch of the United States of America has aligned with open borders. Because we already know anybody can't just come here and have a child on the soil. 0 plus 0 does not equal 1, 2, or 3. But anyway, with the Diddy trial, I heard you all speaking about how they're now taking some of these things against him and utilizing it because of who he is. Now, we've seen this already play out, at least from my perspective. We've seen it play out with Bill Cosby and some others that are in entertainment, right? They have already been accused of certain or accusations of certain things, and they sign these NDAs with their victims, right? And then the next thing you know, now all of a sudden they're still having to go to trial 20 years later, 30 years later for these accusations. So that's the way I see it. I see it as already happening. And if Diddy is so bad, Diddy is in an entertainment with others, and as you all pointed out, with other mafia, but they're not on trial, and they're the ones committing the crimes as well. And they were doing it before Diddy. So Diddy's kind of replicating what all of these other mafia beings have been doing, right? And mafia, we know, is in entertainment, from the NFL to the music industry. Most of entertainment is mob. So why are they not on trial? Why haven't anybody come up against them and put them on trial? We know why. But anyway, alligator Alcatraz. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. Let's set them up all over. I'm all for. You all know I have a different perspective. You want to come to America and then you want to talk crazy or down and denigrate the formerly enslaved or emancipated on this soil. We went through slavery. The 13th Amendment allows for slavery. So I'm all for. They broke the law. Many of them are criminals, and they're finding out they're already a part of cartels and different organizations, whether it's funneling drugs into America. Go ahead and put them in prison, which is, to me, slavery. You can go make $1.25 a day and go fight fires on behalf of the United States government. And then also, in order for you to use that 14th Amendment, you got to be able to use the 13th Amendment. right? You got to use the 13th Amendment, then we can maybe consider you using the 14th Amendment. That's how it works in my brain. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'll land.
Thank you, Sway Me. Appreciate it. Um. Oh,
That's pretty substantial.
What do you mean, Judge?
I just said you're talking good.
You align with me, Judge?
I said I don't have any problems with what you said. I approve of it. Go
All
ahead.
right,
I
then.
know she's shocked that you are aligned with her.
Well, I mean, look, my business for 50 years was to be critical, analytical, reasonable, rational, detached, and objective. So sometimes, even if you agreed with something, your objective is to test it vigorously to see if there are any gaps, holes, or flaws in it. So if you support it, you have tested it to make sure that it's worthy of support. And if there are any flaws, then they can be corrected if necessary. It's not necessarily saying, not forget necessary. It's not always the case that because you question something vigorously that you are attacking the general concept.
Yeah, well, today when he was at Alligator Alcatraz, he floated the idea that some American born citizens, um, should be deported. The really bad people. I have a problem with that because I don't care how bad they are. American citizens should not be deported, by no means. So, you know, it's like, okay, do your job. That's what I voted for you to do, but don't take this shit too far, because at the end of the day, who are these bad people you're speaking of? That deportation of American people, of the bad American people, is not going to be, spread it equally. So I think you need to slow down with that. All right, so
But Dana, can I ask you a question?
yeah.
Like Ilhan Omar, and she came over here under refugee status, and we know that she married her brother to get him over here as a naturalized citizen, and she's a naturalized citizen, and you hear her talking um disparagingly against the United States of America. You would not
No, I said a
denaturalize and
born,
deport her?
American born. That's what Trump was talking about. American born, not
I thought he was talking about denaturalizing those that
No, 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 no,
they're
no,
basically
no. That's
immigrants, but
actually trending. He was like, um, he think it's a good idea that American born citizens who were born here, should be deported. The really bad people should be deported. And it's like, no, you need to slow down. You need to slow down. So, you know, uh, foundational Americans, so American born, not the anchor babies, because they have to go back home with their illegal mother or father, but American citizens, legitimate citizens. He's saying the really bad ones. He was like, that's a good idea. Now, if he was to try and do that, no court, federal or even the Supreme Court, will uphold that shit. So that is a stretch. But for him to even float that idea, it's like sometimes people take it a little bit too far and they need to just reel themselves back in. Because that's what I'm saying. Because if that was the case, that type of the deportation of the very bad American born citizens would not be distributed equally. It would not be an equal deportation. And we all know a particular group that will be targeted first and most. So I totally disagree with that. Okay, the thinker, I'm about to wrap up this space. I really don't want to bring up another speaker. And I've said this, like, people, we're wrapping up soon. So I'll bring you up, but you're going to have to be very quick with what you're going to say, because um, I'm going around now for people to have their last thoughts. So go ahead, the thinker.
Hey Dana, I'm sorry I came up at the last minute. And hello, Judge Joe Brown. I'm a huge fan
Oh,
of both of you, and I live by that barbecue seasoning. I put it on everything. I got to re up, but so I keep it in stock in my cabinets, just so you know. Um, I had a question, and I've only been listening for like 30 or 40 minutes, so I apologize if you've answered it in the beginning. I usually get on on Tuesdays, but I was running late today. My question is about the jury note. When they got the note that the verdicts for counts 2 through 5 were in, um, would the lawyers actually see what the verdict said, or would they just get a note that says they were in and not knowing what the verdicts were?
They won't know what the verdict's about. They
Okay.
won't know what the verdict's about. But let me say this. I am neither one way or the other. I understand the deterrent factor against the government getting excessive. But let's put it this way. Let's, for a hypothetical, say that instead of the charges that Diddy had against him, he's got 4 counts of cheating on his wife. All right. And 1 count of carrying out a long term pattern of cheating on every woman he's dealt with. Well, if he got acquitted on all 4 counts of cheating on his wife, it's not likely that there's going to be any hung jury on whether he cheated on every woman he dealt with, because there's no support for that. On the other hand, if you find out that the jury is hung on a count saying he's cheated with every other woman he's dealt with, there is a high likelihood that somebody got convicted on 4 counts of cheating on his wife. That's just the probabilities of the situation. One of the real things that's wrong with this whole Diddy trial, from my perspective, is that they got too deep into proof of other crimes. American law has been explicit for years. You cannot convict anybody on their habit of convicting crime. You have to convict them on a specific crime. That's like, I'll make this observation. How many times did Al Capone get convicted of murder? The answer, none. But who was responsible for the Valentine's Day massacre? Al Capone, who is notorious and has been for a long time for baseball batting somebody to death in a 5-star hotel at a banquet. Killed a lot of people, but they never could get him for a murder because they could not break the rules of American law, because American law was deemed more important than any one thing that Al Capone did. So there you go. I passed the mic.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dana. Thank you, Judge Joe Brown.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. I want to go to I'll go to B Boy, RC, Derek, Deborah, Sway Me, The Thinker, Floyd, honey. I'm not bringing nobody else up because it's late. And I don't know why people wait to the last fucking minute when I said no more speakers, like we're closing out. Like I hate when people, I really do. That is another
It
pet
looks like a
peeve.
troll anyway, too, Dana. So I wouldn't worry
Okay,
about Floyd.
good. Like, go ahead. Who did I say? Oh, go ahead, B Boy.
Hey, okay, thanks for giving me a
Yes,
last
this is
word here,
closing
Dana.
remarks, guys.
Yeah, well, I just like to say, yes, I really don't like. Uh, I would hate for this for Diddy to be found guilty because of the precedent it sets, obviously. And I would just like to say that there should be some repercussion for uh, women, men, whoever who make false accusations, because there's no recourse for people that do that. When someone's acquitted or found not guilty or found not liable, the person that has accused them falsely is never, especially when it's a woman. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is never held accountable. And I just think that these laws should change. And I'll leave it right there, Dana. Thank you so much.
Shanna in the chat on YouTube says, Dana, can you ask? I guess you meant Judge Joe Brown. Yeah, what he thinks this verdict would be. So, what do you think the verdict would be, Judge? That's Shanna.
I just told you. Uh, I'll give a probability. I'd say maybe 60-40 It's what's going on right now is they've reached a guilty verdict on the 4 counts of Mann Act, and some of them are hung up on whether or not they'll go RICO. That's
That's the question I
No,
wanted to
60-40.
ask you, Judge. Wait,
Judge, it's
wait
only
one
2 counts of
Peter,
man.
wait. I
Well,
wanted
yeah,
to
but
ask you
I
this.
call it all
Wait,
Mann
I
Act
wanted
because
to
it's got to
ask you
do
this
with
question, Judge. Let
sexuality.
me ask you this
Go
question.
ahead.
The question I want to ask you is, if he's found not guilty on RICO, then what does it say about the other charges that they're saying guilty? Because isn't that the major thing, the RICO charge?
Yeah, but he still would have 4 guilty verdicts to take a deal with. The thing is if they deadlock mistrial because of inability to reach a verdict on the first count, which is RICO, and they acquit him on the other 4 counts, technically the government can go back and try him again for the count that's the subject to the mistrial.
So if it's a
They did that to
mistrial,
John
wait
Gotti Jr. four
one
times.
second, Peter. If it's a mistrial, then he has to sit in jail until that trial starts again.
He could, unless the judge reduces the bond situation or lets him post one. See, I don't get it. The first person ever charged under the Mann Act, and that's essentially all of what this stuff is about, even though only 2 counts, as you point out, Peter, are specifically Mann Act counts. They still deal with sexual misconduct. The man that was the target of the Mann Act, Jack Johnson.
Oh yeah, please don't tell that story again. We get it.
I won't tell the whole story.
No,
The
it's
first person. No, wait a minute.
I
Just
just want to no, Judge, because
give me
I'm
10
really
seconds, and
I'm
I'm
tired
it
right now.
goes
Everybody
it goes
knows
to
the
the
Jack
sentencing.
Johnson
Just
situation.
indulge me.
I just
Indulge
want to
me.
get to no. I'm
I
not going
know.
to indulge you. I
Indulge
can't
me.
do it.
It's
I'm not.
very quick.
I
Very
know,
quick.
no, Judge.
Very. Just
It's
listen.
not
You
that I
ask
don't.
how much
Judge, can you just
you.
stop for a second? I have
Go
not
ahead.
spoken all fucking night. Everybody's been speaking, and you spoke a whole lot. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole right now. I don't want.
We're not
I
going down
don't
a
want to
rabbit
hear.
hole.
I don't want to hear the Jack Johnson story. If
I'm not going to give you the Jack Johnson story.
I
Here's
just
the
want you to.
story.
I just
The
want to.
first man ever charged with it got 1 year on conviction of it. He's the purpose of the laws in question. He got 1 year when he got convicted.
Yeah, thank you.
So now, when you get that, just think about it. We've got all of this, how much? 18 months worth of hell going on, all of this public money and attention. And the first person ever be sentenced under similar statutes got 1 year.
Well, no, he wasn't the only person that got sentenced under that
No, but he
statute.
was the first.
He was the
They
first, but
used to
he
call it
wasn't
the
the
Jack
last, and that
Johnson
doesn't
Act.
mean that Diddy is going to get 1 year. That's not
Uh,
see that's and this is why I want to skip
yeah,
over that. I just want to the question
yeah.
asked from YouTube, and I want to move on to
What do
the
you
next
think he's going to
person.
get? What do you think he's going to get? That was the answer. I just said
Do
no
you
telling.
think
It's
he's going to
guidelines.
be found guilty?
I said there was a 60-40% chance he would be found guilty of the 40 of the 4 counts they say they've got a verdict on, because it's not logical to say we have acquitted him on 4 counts that would be the crimes that would be subject to the organized crime activity. Because how can you be deadlocked on organized crime when you haven't found him guilty of any crimes?
So
So it's just
if he's not guilty, we don't know if he's guilty or not guilty on counts 2 to 5. And if he's guilty, they should not be deadlocked on count 1.
No,
wait, let me
it's logical to be deadlocked on count 1 because that's organized crime. In other
they,
words, what crime has he been committing in an organized fashion? Answer would be these sexual offenses.
no.
So if they don't find him guilty of any sexual offenses, what crimes did they have that he was engaged in an organized fashion that he got indicted for but not alluded to during the course of this rambling proof of other
I one
crimes?
second,
Judge,
Peter. Wait, Peter, just give me 1 second, because Shan has been dropping money, and we have to tend to the people that's been dropping money first and foremost. So Shannon says, Dana, so can you ask the judge if he gets the Mann Act, he could get time served or question mark?
He would get credit for it.
Okay, he would get credit. Go ahead,
How long has
Peter.
you been in jail?
yeah.
And
So
Six
Peter,
years,
can you
what I
make
was
it
going to
quick?
more
say,
So I
than
want to
you?
get to the other
I'll make it.
speakers.
Yes, I'll be super quick. So there's 4 counts that they came to a verdict on, right? We don't know what the verdict is, but there is a way that they could be acquitting on all those charges and still be up in the air on the RICO, because the RICO has predicate acts that aren't listed in the 4 other counts. You had kidnapping, you had drug distribution, you had witness tampering and obstruction of justice, you had the underlying prostitution, and you had 2 other offenses. So here's how I think it's going. I think there's a split verdict right now for what they even found. I think that they're not guilty on both sex trafficking charges, which carry a mandatory minimum of 15 years on each count. And I think they found him guilty on the Mann Act charges, because it's very easy to find him guilty on those charges, because you're just transporting somebody across state lines for the purpose of prostitution. So if they found him guilty on those 2 Mann Act charges, the speaker that you just, or the person that wrote, is correct. There is no mandatory minimum, and he could theoretically, if the judge wanted to, sentence Diddy to time served with supervised release on those Mann Act counts. But they could have found him. It's not likely, but they could have acquitted him on all those other charges and still be deadlocked on the RICO, because the RICO has those predicate acts which aren't part of the other 4 charges that they came to a verdict on.
I
That's
don't
All
all I'm saying.
right.
disagree
So
with
let
you.
me.
I don't disagree with you. I said it was a 60-40% probability.
All right. I
So
wanna.
that leaves that 40% in there, the flexibility. That is a distinct possibility. And the other problem with this whole thing is you put all of these hats on the same rack, that you have to say each and every element necessary to convict of the RICO thing, you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. So here you have all of these various and sundry criminal acts that have to be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. That could hang the jury up, because the rest of them are simple. Yeah, they could get him on Mann Act easily enough, 2 counts guilty and 2 counts acquitted.
I'm just
But
saying,
it's
and
going to
Shannon is
depend
saying
on a
the same
certain.
thing. All right, because I need to move on to the other people that have their last remarks. Shannon is saying the same thing I'm saying. If they can't find him guilty, if they can't find him guilty on 2, 3, 4 count, how would he be found guilty on the RICO? So I think those 2, 3, 4, and 5 counts. I think it's not guilty. So, but whatever. All right. Go ahead, Deborah, Derek.
Well, Dana, I just explained it too.
I
There's
don't
other
need you to
predicate acts that.
re-explain it. That's fine. I don't need you to re-explain it. Go ahead,
One
Deborah.
quick
Okay,
thing.
Go ahead. I
Yesterday
need
it
Deborah
was
to. Please, can we
yeah,
just have people say their
I,
last?
okay.
Can
Hold
people
on,
yeah.
say
Dana.
their last remarks, Judge, and then you can say
Okay, it's
your
not
last and
last
close out the
remarks.
space.
Yesterday you published, when we were on YouTube, you published a list of the findings that the judge directed that the jury go through and indicate their findings on. If you look at that list, it'll give you some clue of the stages they went through
Then
so they get
these
where they
people,
are now.
and this is the thing: you cannot talk about something that this is X. These people probably didn't watch the show
I know they
yesterday.
didn't, but they can go look at what
No,
we
they
put
look
on
at what?
YouTube.
Where
They can look
Your
at
in the
your
what you
show,
show,
put
Dana,
on
Dana?
because
YouTube.
I meant to go catch it. I didn't catch it,
No,
but I got to go back and look.
actually, I'm tired.
Well,
Nobody's
I
not.
know, but they can
Nobody.
look
No,
it
no,
up
no,
on
no.
their
Nobody
leisure.
is not saying a last remark. I'm about to end the space because I'm tired. If I'm telling people let me move on to the next person, and you keep talking, it's already 3 hours, and it's things I got to do tomorrow. So I think we all said enough, and I'm tired. So
You mean
everybody,
you run out of energy?
no, you're talking. You talk. You got too much energy where you're not even allowing me or other people to say anything. And I'm just like, all right, I wanted people to have the last remarks, but if you keep saying stuff, then it's just going to delay the space,
Well,
and then it's
Peter's
going
been
to be
making
over
some
three
very interesting
hours.
remarks here. Attorney Gavin came up with some very good ones too, and
That was
so
an
has a
hour
couple other
ago, which
people.
is fine,
Yeah.
but that's the purpose of people talking. But if I'm saying let people have the last word, stop
Well, let
interjecting
them
because it's
have it.
going to prolong
I'll
the
be quiet.
space.
Let them
But
vent.
it
So let's
doesn't
go.
matter because I'm about to just close out. I'm tired.
How
So
many people
good
we
night,
have left?
everybody. It doesn't matter. Just good
How
night,
many people we
everybody.
have left?
Good night. Good
Good
night.
night.
Uh,
Good night.